What's up? Ghost Fictions is here and we're back again. This is a story where Issei left the Gremorys and joined Sairaorg Bael. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 2. The day of the meeting had finally arrived. The three factions gathered at Kuo Academy, the leaders making their way to the large meeting room at top floor. The faction soldiers stood guard throughout the entire academy, filling the courtyard with angels, fallen, and devils. And a large barrier, much stronger than Sona and her peerages, was erected around the school, not allowing anyone in or out. Inside the building, the groups walked down the halls, heading toward said meeting room. They could feel the tension and some couldn't help but feel nervous. The first to arrive was Sairaorg. He had his fellow Devil King, Sairaorg Leviathan, at his side, looking as perky and easygoing as always. His trusted queen, Grafia, also stood close behind them, standing as the escort to her king. Along with her were the escorts of Sairaorg, Kusha, Issei, and Ladora. The three stood close to the Queen of Lucifer, a professional and monotone atmosphere about them as well. That was excluding the hand-holding between the queen and pawn of Sairaorg. Issei had discussed with her and the Rook of his nervousness and anxiety since returning to his hometown, following Drake's advice. The young woman was more than happy to offer him a gesture of comfort. So they stood very close, fingers intertwined. The Dragonkin offered his comfort as well with a hand on his fellow devil's shoulder. It was enough to say the trio had become quite close. Rias and her peerage, as well as Sona and her queen, Tsubaki, stood at a wall not too far off from the trio. The heiress of Gremory never took her eyes off her former pawn since she walked into the room, and the moment she caught sight of his hand holding with the queen's, her heart felt a small twinge of pain. Regret surfaced once more inside her, and she started to question herself once more. Issei did his best to pay her no mind, keeping a professional air about him as he discussed light topics with his two companions. All the while staying under the gaze of Rias and her peerage. Next to arrive was Azazel and his lone escort. The fallen angel was dressed in a long burgundy trench coat with black belts around his abdominal, arms, and wrists. He also had grey pants and black shoes, with a necklace just for added flair. Behind him his bodyguards stood, leaning against the wall without a care in the world. The boy was in his late teens with silver hair and hazel eyes. He wore a dark green V-neck shirt with a high-collared black leather jacket over it. With it were burgundy jeans with a silver chain and black leather chaps, with 3 bands encircling his right calf, and black shoes with black buckles. It had been revealed by Sairaorg to Issei that the boy, Vali, was the one to defeat Kakabiel in the end. He was the White Dragon Emperor and Issei's fated rival. But with all the important business that transpired, the brunette had been unable to see him until the moment he walked in. Upon first eye contact, a fire could be seen in both teens' eyes. It was easy to discern that both dragons' first meeting with one another wasn't a good one. Though it was to be expected seeing as the duo were destined to fight one another. But even the Wielders themselves seemed to have a personal connection to their rival. The last to arrive was Michael. Behind him, Irina and Zenobia sat as escorts. The former had her Excalibur mimic strapped to her side, while the latter held Durandal over her back. The leaders took to their seats at a round table. And with that, all parties had arrived and the meeting could commence. Now that everyone is accounted for, I'll say the preconditions for the meeting. The people present here acknowledge the most important event and forbidden subject. And uphold their word to keep what is said here to be truthful. Sairaorg spoke up first, looking at the entire room carefully. Everyone had nodded their heads. Then we may proceed. As the meeting began, the leaders bounced around a few topics, speaking of each other as if they were old-time friends. There would be a few light chuckles and small banter. Issei knew it as a way to ease into the more important subjects. He could feel everyone's tension in the room, seeing as the stakes were high, but with the leaders' charisma and jokes of one another, the brunette could feel the heavy air lighten bit by bit. Once it was deemed time, the reports on the Kakabiel incident were called forth. Alright, now to discuss the main topic that brings all of us together. Sairaorg announced with closed eyes. Rias and Sona, if you would please give the report that was received by all parties. Ah yes, Lucifer-sama. The heiress was caught off guard, having been watching Issei the entire time. But she snapped from her stupor and turned to face the room, now focused elsewhere. She made sure to give a full summary of the event, not missing a single detail. She spoke of the initial attack, the fused Excaliburs, the mentioning of God's death, the arrival of Sairaorg servants, the battle, and the arrival of the Hakyuku and defeat of Kakabiel. With each detail, the leaders each had different reactions upon the matter. Sairaorg and Sairaorg were upset and concerned over the matter as a whole. The fact their sisters were attacked and they were unable to do nothing was very worrisome for both Devil Kings. And with each detail of how he toyed with them, it made the mass wonder if they should have the princesses return to the underworld or possibly leave someone there who could protect them. Michael had a saddened expression, hearing how corrupted his former brother had become. Bael and he weren't close, but had a well enough relationship in heaven. But once the former angel got a taste for war, he never had been the same. And it seemed that the very desire he fell for was also the reason for his inevitable downfall. And Azazel, he was smiling. It wasn't positive in any way, in fact, it was out of embarrassment. It was his fault for letting Bael run free. Now, because of his carelessness for his underlings, he, as the Governor General, had to sit there, in a meeting room, and fix what thin thread the factions had for a ceasefire. He'd much rather continue his research, but Issei would never let him hear the end of it if he skipped out. So here he was, playing damage control due to his lack of being a leader. After she finished with the departure of Vali and Bael, Rias stepped back before Sona co-signed on the review. "Thank you," Sairaorg said, nodding his head in acknowledgement. "Great job, girls. Levi Tan is so proud of you," Sairaorg added with a big smile. "Gusha, do you or your party have anything to add?" the redeeted Mao asked. The queen stepped forward, momentarily separating herself from Issei. "No sir, the report is accurate and correct. All points are valid and we agree with the report as well." She then stepped back and returned her hand to the pawns. "Alright. Now then, Azazel, what do you have to say about the report given?" Sairaorg now turned his attention to the fallen angel. Everyone's eyes also followed. With an intrepid smile, Azazel sat back in his seat and folded his arms. Regarding the incident a few days back, Bael kept quiet to the other leaders, as well as myself, the governor, and acted independently. His punishment was enforced, and he has been eternally frozen in the deepest part of hell, Cocytus. The explanation for that was written in the material that was forwarded to you. That is all. Michael was the one to speak up next. "I have read said report and know that you, yourself, haven't intent to cause trouble. Am I correct?" Azazel smirked at this and closed his eyes. "I have no want or need for war. I am a simple collector nowadays and have no desire to fight," the seraph replied before opening his eyes once more. Sairaorg rose a brow, now fully focusing his attention on the seraph of the Gregory. "Enlighten us on this matter then, Azazel. Why have you been gathering owners of sacred gears for the past decades? At first I thought you were gathering humans and attempting to augment your battle potential. I even anticipated you to wage war against Heaveneros, but the Mao drifted off, to which the leader of heaven quickly picked up on. Yes, no matter how much time passed, you didn't wage war on any of us. When I heard you got hold of the Hakyuku, I was enveloped by a strong wariness," he stated, motioning over to Vali. He had every right to be wary of the boy. At such a young age he was able to take down a fallen angel leader with ease. Even the devils brought me concern with the Sairaorg at first. But that was quickly crushed upon our initial meeting, which is also in our reports. I have read them as well. And for the first concern, I am only researching the sacred gears. I'm too interested in the world now to dare try and change it. Or wage war. Do you guys not trust the Gregory at all?" Azazel replied with a shake of his head. He obviously didn't like that the other two factions were so wary of him. "Anyways, let's just get on about peace. That's the hidden motive to why we're all here, isn't it?" Few in the room's eyes widened. The only ones seemingly left out were Rias and Sona and their servants. The others in the room tensed slightly, some even narrowing their eyes. Those were talks kept between heaven and the devils. The fallen angel grinned while resting his head against his fist. "We do admit that Sairaorg and I have discussed the topic. But with the attack, it almost seemed the Gregory was against it until we received your report," Michael admitted. "It's a good thing you have. We are much too old to still be fighting over problems of the past that didn't involve even half of us. However, it is not truly our place to completely agree on this. Two important figures in this room have the ability to go against this treaty, seeing as they were original causes of the ceasefire. Without their agreement, peace can't be fully achieved." Everyone in the room knew of the two powers and looked towards the figures in question. Vali and Issei had a quick moment of eye contact, and the fire burning inside hadn't quelled at all since the start of the meeting. In fact, the smugness of the white dragon and aegis of the red dragon only seemed to make the fire burn brighter until everyone in the room felt it. "Well, Hakyuku, what do you say?" Michael asked. "My dream is to fight strong opponents, nothing more," Vali answered with a carefree shrug, casting his eyes away from Issei. This made Azazel chuckle, and he glanced towards the silverette from the corner of his eye. "You can still do that without causing a war, Vali," he replied, and received another shrug in response. "And you, Sairaorg?" His attention turned to the other heavenly dragon wielder. Issei was instantly put on the spotlight. He unconsciously tightened his grip, feeling nervous from the sudden focus of the room. The boy scratched his cheek as he chuckled awkwardly with a tense smile. "To be honest, I still don't understand it all too well. Currently, all I wish to do is protect my friends and grow stronger. Both with my bonds and with my power." His feelings sounded truthful, and he honestly didn't seem to be against the idea of peace. Issei looked at Kusha, who was smiling supportively. She rubbed the back of his palm with her thumb, feeling as it slowly relaxed his grip. But still, he was a huge factor and could become a massive threat in the future if his power grew out of control. They needed to know a precise answer so they could prepare for the worst if it ever came. Not that any of the leaders thought Issei would want such a thing. But they had to cover every possible outcome. You are one of those who has the power to change multiple worlds, Sairaorg. If you don't make your choice, then it would be difficult for those standing on top of each of the powers, such as myself, to move without looking over our shoulders. Azazel replied. He was very adamant with achieving peace. His reasons different from others, however, as long as the outcome was the same, he would try his best to ease the burden. Issei Haidu, let me explain it in a very simple manner. If we fight, then there will be a need for you to also fight at the front lines, seeing as you can stand with the leaders before you. If that happens, you will have to fight and defend those you consider allies and friends every day. And that will also place them in the way of danger as well. This got the brunette's attention. His eyes widened and he stepped slightly in front of Kusha. Almost no one, except Kusha and Rias, noticed. Issei also cast a quick glance towards Rias' peerage, more specifically Asia. For the first time in a long time they shared eye contact, and the pawn could still see the nun he had saved from the church. The same innocent and kind girl he risked everything to save. She still had that apologetic look from the day he left, and he could still feel the need to protect her now that he had come face her once more. He didn't blame her, he realized that she was only doing her duty as a servant. He knew that all too well from his first few days being a devil. If there's peace, everyone would be safe, would they not? He asked the black-winged seraph. Azazel's grin widened. Yes, that's correct. If we make peace, then there won't be a need to fight. If that happens, then what is left is the most important. Continuation of the species and prosperity. In other words, you could indulge in procreating with the Queen of Bael, whose hand you haven't let go of. How's that? Is it easy to understand now? Azazel's grin was a bit too mischievous. Kusha and Issei's faces were bright red, now having been put out for the entire room to know. Their eyes quickly fell to the floor, and the accuser's laughter filled the silence. It would seem I've hit the nail on the head. So what do you say, Sairaorg? I would prefer peace. The pawn replied softly. Everyone heard it. Kusha's sharp inhale followed as she tightened her grip. Her blush grew darker and she found herself fascinated by the floor. Rias, on the other hand, had a deep frown on her face. She hadn't expected the governor to call out the two for their display of affection, but he had. And when he questioned them on it, Issei admitted that he wanted to continue what she could see was a developing relationship. And it didn't sit right with the heiress at all. Something inside her didn't like what she was seeing. It left a bad taste in her mouth at seeing Issei happy after leaving. He was supposed to be weak and worthless. Her gut feeling told her that he was a mistake. But here, in front of her, he had proved that wrong. He grew stronger, created new bonds with a new family, defeated a cadre-class angel, and now was starting to grow closer to another woman. Why? Why hadn't she stuck by him? Would he be this strong if she didn't trade him? Would he have those feelings for her as he does the queen? Would the bonds between him and her peerage have been stronger than before? Would he be happy if he had stayed? Sadly, Rias knew the answer to none of these. And it actually began to pain her that he was achieving so much more. She regretted her decision more and more each day, but now, standing so close to him and witnessing these changes, she truly didn't know what to think. So all she could do was stare at him, almost envious. Maybe, just maybe. But you, are you? Kiba had leaned forward and placed a hand on his king's shoulder. He watched her the entire time and could see her distraught. Before he could finish his sentence, a quick shift was felt in the air. There was no warning or no hesitation. Less than a second was all it took, and not a single person in the room had been able to react to the sudden feeling that flooded the room. Time had been frozen then and there. The leaders were all unaffected, as well as Grafia, Zenobia, Kiba, Vali, Issei, Kusha, Rias, and Arena. But everyone and everything else around them had stopped moving completely. The clock that sat on the far wall to the right no longer ticked, proving their point further. Ayakeno. Murayama. Caddis. Rias spoke as she turned to her peerage members. None of them responded. So, they made their move. Azazel suddenly spoke grimly. Who? Seraphil asked. Most of the room, those who were unfrozen, turned to the fallen angel, again. He looked towards the window and sighed. Cow's brigade. There were shocked gasps, while others narrowed their eyes. From the looks of things, they used the Bishop of Little Gremory. Azazel analyzed. Rias and Kiba were shocked. Forcing the half-vampire into balance breaker, very sneaky. And with every passing minute it'll grow stronger till we're all frozen in time. There is a sacred gear that's strong. Issei asked surprised. Yes, Forbidden Baelor view. Its power is immeasurable despite the user's lack of control over it. It is why the boy was sealed by Serziches himself. The Grigori leader explained. Azazel made his way to the window and looked outside. Everyone followed to see all the faction's forces frozen as well. A large magic circle laid above the school, multitudes of people dressed in black robes floating down into the main courtyard. They all wore hoods, a large eye on the front, and evil grins on their faces. How could they have gotten through the barrier? Kiba asked. We were betrayed. Serziches answered with deep reservation. What? Betrayed? Issei repeated. Yes, there wouldn't be a way for the group to be able to teleport straight in without someone notifying and sneaking them through. And it has to be someone on the inside who was able to open a gateway. Michael added. What do we do then? Issei asked. First, we need to get the little vampire boy back under our control. Problem with that is that those pesky terrorists went as far as to cut off our teleportation, so getting there won't be easy. Azazel said as he watched the enemies tear through their immobile forces with ease. I could just kill the vampire if you want. Blowing up that little school building should be a. No, we don't want to start off on a bad note, Volley. Azazel chastised, looking back at the grinning boy. If you have that much time on your hands, why not use it on those magicians out there? Issei Haidu, you should go too. Azazel spoke up. I'm sure having the Hacker Yuiku and Seker Yuite out there will surely put a hole through their defenses, wouldn't you say? Volley and Issei shared another death glare. But this one eventually settled as they simultaneously closed their eyes and sighed. The dragons silently agreed and nodded their heads, seeing no point in sticking around to gaze at each other. Plus it was a good way to let off the steam they had been building towards one another. Vanishing Dragon. Balance Breaker. Welsh Dragon. Balance Breaker. Both heavenly dragons' voices boomed before the duo donned their scale mail armor. They looked at each other before turning and looking out the window. It was a second of silence before they both burst through to the outside. Sounds of explosions sounded immediately, and the bodies of mages began to fall. A few others were obliterated as a few were blasted by a dragon shot or incinerated by Volley's magic. It was a complete massacre as the two dragons were making quick work of the mages. Those two are actually exceeding my original assumption. Azazel praised with a smirk. It would seem they are in competition whilst creating an opening for us. Serziches explained, smiling himself. It was obvious both leaders were prideful in seeing the heavenly dragon of their faction dominate the terrorists outside. Yes, well, we still have to wait for the rescue of the bishop before we can begin our counterattack. Michael spoke up, being the man of neutrality. So, how will we save Gasper? Kiba asked, bringing everyone back into the room. What about castling? Rias suggested. This caught everyone's attention. What's castling? Irina asked, cocking her head to the side. Castling is when you trade the king's position with a rook piece in one move. Kiba explained. We do have the rook piece in the club room, if I'm not mistaken. But you, take me with you. Gasper needs us as we're the only ones able to calm him down. Yes. He's my bishop and we need to save him. Rias, I'll send you two back then. Serziches said, to which the younger sister nodded. Azazel then stepped forward to the two. He fished something out of his pocket before handing it to the blonde knight. Once you secure the vampire, put this on him. It'll bring his power back under control and turn time forward. Kiba looked to see it was a bracelet. He clenched it tight in his hand before he placed it in his pocket. He had to step up. After witnessing Issei's power twice, he realized he had been left behind. This was his one chance to do something. Asia was right in her accusation towards Rias, she was too soft on them. They had to work hard, just as Issei had, otherwise they would die. Alright. I'll begin the trade then. The Gremory magic circle appeared beneath the knight and king's feet before shining and quickly fading. Once it did, it revealed a white rook piece, sitting where they once stood. Good luck. Zoxoxoxox. A few moments of waiting passed as the large-scale, one-sided battle roared on outside. The screams of hundreds of magicians were heard, and the source of blue and red lights were seen flashing across the sky. The leaders watched analytically while the teens could watch in awe at the power the two dragons unleashed. Suddenly, a new source of magic filled the room. Everyone easily noticed it due to the power being flared as if it was trying to intimidate them, and they turned to the source. From a magic circle similar to the one outside, a young woman stepped out with a wicked grin. She was a tall bespectacled woman with a voluptuous figure. She had dark skin with long brown hair tied into a bun. She wore a dress that was extremely low cut and had a high slit on both leg sides, which exposed a large portion of her breasts, thighs, and behind. Kateria Leviathan. Serziches announced without a hint of friendliness. What brings you here? Seraphil asked seriously. The woman laughed heartily before she spun her staff and rose it. I'm here to bring the first steps of chaos and destruction. She replied as if it was obvious. Her staff lit up, catching the group's immediate attention. Doon. An explosion destroyed the entire room, smoke and fire now rising as the initial attack settled. The newcomer fell back to the sky, marveling at her power. She barely used a fraction, and yet she had rocked the very foundation under her targets. Well, it wasn't enough to kill them, they were sure to have been shaken. When the smoke cleared, it showed everyone inside of a barrier, quickly set up by Michael, Azazel, and Serziches. Sairaorg and Grafia had also taken quick action and covered the kids who were still frozen in time. All around, everyone was safe and unharmed. Haha, so the three great powers put up a combined defensive barrier. How beautiful. As well as pathetic. Kateria mocked. From inside the barrier, everyone could see she easily destroyed a good portion of the school. They moved to the school grounds outside and released the barrier. Why are you doing this, Kateria? Sairaorg asked. The brunette growled at the female Mao. Sairaorg. She spoke lowly. You stole my title and now question my motives. A pretty little mouth like yours should be blasted off. I'll be sure to kill you and take my title back. The old Leviathan declared. It's safe to assume we're not in a devil's coup d'etat? Azazel asked, making his presence known. No, more like a world domination scheme. Michael answered. The terrorist then began to laugh once more with a large grin on her face. Michael hit the nail on the head. The brunette congratulated sarcastically. I will kill all of you here and overthrow these corrupted parties. No longer shall devils be mocked as we shall rule heaven, hell, and everything in between. We, as the true mass, shall reform this decaying and destructive realm into how we see fit from this point forward. You know, that's similar to those cliché lines villains use before they're defeated by the good guys. Azazel joked as he stepped towards the terrorist. He unleashed his wings and began to fly up to the height of Kateria. When he came face to face with her, the devil could only openly laugh as if she was tickled. You have jokes, Governor General. It seems you want to fall at my hands first, huh? If you're willing to settle for little Alemi. Azazel replied with a smirk. The woman quickly lost her own as she settled for glaring instead. The air between the two became thick as they begun to release their power. The amount they exuded told everyone in the area that things were going to get serious. And anyone in the way would only get caught in the ceasefire. When they released the first burst, any mage within the zone was killed instantly. So be it. I'll kill you, then the rest of you will be next. Kateria announced as she readied her staff. Azazel summoned a spear of light in return and held it to his side. Then let's get to it, shall we? Boom. Kateria fell back from her and Azazel's exchange. She had put a large amount of power into her attack, and yet the Grigori leader was unfazed. She grit her teeth, angered at the fact that the seraph looked to be taunting her. It would seem you're low on juice. Tell me, did you really think you stood a chance of taking all of us on? Even now, when you can't seem to stand against little Alemi. Azazel spoke with a grin. Yeah, he was definitely taunting. Shut your mouth, Azazel. I have more than enough power to kill everyone standing here. The brunette shot back. Fringes of hair fell onto her face, breaking the last bit of regalia she had. Now she looked no more than a deranged devil. Her eyes were wide, her teeth were grit with such anger, it was hard for her to uphold what little prestige she had left. She held up her hand and a magic circle appeared in it. In a quick flash, a jar was seen in its place. The fallen angel narrowed his eyes, not at the jar, but at what was inside of it. There, perfectly coiled and slumbering, a black snake sat inside. It took a second before it opened its eyes, revealing purple orbs that seemed void and empty. It rose its head and glanced around before it leveled its gaze at the governor, himself. It released a sharp hiss, showing off its long and jagged fangs that dripped a purplish glowing liquid. The fallen could feel an ominous power coming from the reptile. It was something foreign and yet familiar to him. He felt that he knew what that creature was but couldn't quite place his finger on it. And what made it more confusing was why such a thing was in the hands of Kateria. Hahaha, I see this has caught your attention. The Leviathan cackled, motioning to the jar. It is the final piece that will allow me to bury you and the other falsified leaders who dare stand against me. The woman popped the cork that sealed the jar. The snake didn't take its eyes off Azazel as she lifted it and began to open her mouth. The leader rose a brow at the realization that she planned to swallow the reptile. The fallen let his curiosity get the better of him as he made very little attempts to try and stop her. Instead, he opted to reach for the specialized dagger stashed in a sheath under his coat. It looked like he would need Fafnir if things were going to get out of hand. And there was no telling due to the endless abyss, feeling that the snake gave off the longer it stared at him. Ha! Shatter. The sudden shout sounded throughout the battlefield. Shortly following was the sound of glass breaking and a hiss of pain. Both Azazel and Kateria were surprised when a needle of green energy shot past a ladder and broke the jar in her hand. The snake had the needle embedded in its eye as it writhed in the air before bursting into particles of black. Both leaders turned to the source of the attack to see the red scale mail-cladded devil. He had his arm outstretched, giving the obvious conclusion that he was the assailant. He had no idea what he destroyed, but a feeling overcame him during his rampage against the mages. Some deep feeling told him to turn, just in time to see Kateria uncork the jar. Once she did, every fiber of his body screamed for him to destroy it, as the power radiating off the creature sent a shiver up his spine. The Leviathan switched from shock to furious the moment her eyes landed on the boy. Any last hope that she had of defeating the leaders was now gone. Her mana was just about depleted, and she still hadn't taken out the Grigori leader, still leaving Michael and the mouse left. That snake was supposed to be her ultimate boost that would allow her to obliterate the city itself, but now that was impossible. "Heh, nice job, kid," Azazel said with a toothy grin. "I would have liked to see what that snake would do, but you also just saved me the trouble of having to get serious." Kateria growled as her focus switched between the Grigori leader and the Sairaorg. She couldn't decide which she was seething at more. The former, who was openly mocking her, or the latter, who got in her way. Crack. Crash. The sounds of shattering filled everyone's ears. They looked up to see the massive gateway crack before breaking just as the jar did. The air surrounding the group began to flow again, and the odd feeling, from when time stopped, disappeared. It was now obvious that Kiba and Rias had freed Gasper. It was further proven when the trio and Kaneko appeared outside the old school building through a magic circle, revealing that they could teleport once more. All of the ones who were frozen were unfrozen, and many looked confused as they looked around. But once it all became clear, the remainder of the armies, as well as those from the meeting room, took action to begin a counterattack. The remaining mages were quick to try and take out as many as they could, but it was all useless. The forces behind quickly began to overwhelm them with little effort. Many of the terrorists were either dying or surrendering, leaving what little was left to attempt to escape. But there was no way out, and the collapsing force of the three great powers brought down every last mage. Panic began to set in on the brunette Leviathan. Both her trump cards had been stopped, and her remaining forces were being decimated by the three factions. All of her hard work and planning was starting to crumble before her very eyes. She would be left with nothing, captured, and interrogated into revealing what she knew about Cow's brigade. She couldn't let that happen. No, she wouldn't let it happen. "Kateria, it's over. You've lost, so give it up." Azazel spoke up. The devil clenched her fist and grit her teeth. It was victory or death for her. "I'll never surrender," she shouted. The Leviathan turned and threw her hands out, stretching them as if they were some kind of rubber, and wrapped her arms around the Grigori leader. "I don't need to live for our goals to succeed. As long as I can take one of you with me, that's more than enough to welcome death." Well, death is okay for you." Azazel paused momentarily before summoning a light spear. He sliced through the appendages with ease, shocking Kateria the lack of fear in her opponent's eyes. "I still have a lot left to do. And your little parlor trick has punched your one-way ticket to the other side. Farewell." With that, he threw the spear, piercing right through the terrorist's skull. There was no time for her to scream as she was vaporized within the same second. Azazel folded his arms and sighed. "If you had spent more time training instead of seeking vengeance, maybe you'd have stood a better chance," he chastised to the fallen devil. There was no way for her to hear him, but he simply wanted to talk out loud. Issei had watched the final moments with wide eyes. He was in awe at the power the fallen seraph possessed. It was on a totally different level from Kakabiel, and even that terrorist devil was stronger than the 10-winged warmonger. He could sense the power leaking off of them, and the potency coming from the governor showed Issei he was no match for him at all. It was actually scary that such a lazy and nonchalant man had that much power at his disposal. "Hey kid," Azazel called out. The angel had his back to the boy but could feel his eyes on him. Yes." Issei snapped in reply, caught off guard. "What you did saved me a lot of annoyances. My curiosity took over and could have endangered others." "You knew that snake was dangerous, didn't you?" the leader asked, turning to face the pawn. "Oh no. It gave off this weird power. Something dark and endless. It was like staring into the abyss without having to look at it," Issei replied, scratching the back of his head. "I felt something ominous once she summoned that thing. My body kind of moved on its own and destroyed it." Azazel cupped his chin in his hand. He closed his eyes and hummed in thought. It had to have been his instinct. But for such a young and inexperienced child to have that kind of instinct in the midst of fighting all those mages. The governor's curiosity began to peak, but for the Sairaorg that continued to amaze him. Boom. In the midst of his thoughts, a powerful blast struck Azazel in his back, sending him into the ground. Issei's eyes widened before he turned to see Vali as the assailant. The Hakuryukoi hovered above him, hand outstretched. "Vali, bad boy. How could you?" Azazel asked, pulling himself from the small crater he created. He sounded the least bit hurt and, actually, had a look of expectancy on his face. Had he already known of Vali's betrayal? "Sorry Azazel, things looked a little more fun on the side." The Silverette replied. "Is that so?" The angel asked, dusting himself off. He stood from the crater and leapt into the sky, coming up to level with the betrayer. Let me ask you this then, the one you're working for. Is it office? Everyone had shocked looks at the question. It wasn't possible for the Ouroboros dragon to involve itself with such trivial matters. What reasoning could make that dragon come out and create a terrorist organization? Yes, Office is the one who leads Cow's brigade. She gathers the strongest from the ends of the earth, all with one goal in mind. Vali explained with ease. So it wasn't a kept secret on who lead them. It wouldn't happen to be a conquering kind of thing, right? No, neither her nor I have such desires for any of that. Vali answered swiftly. Our dream has aligned for defeating something much bigger than you and I. Nothing more. I see. But how you worked with Kateria and how you brought her here of all places and time, it would have been a calculated guess that you wanted your title back as well. The group's eyes widened once more. Wait, he's a descendant of a former devil king. Sairaorg voiced everyone's thoughts. I am Vali Lucifer. Great-grandson to the former great king of the underworld, Lucifer. But I am a mere half-blood, born of a human mother, which allows me to also be the White Dragon Emperor. Vali then turned to Issei. Both entered a stare-down as their eyes bore into one another. Those around them could see the fire building up again, as their helmets did little to hide the growing flames between the two. Their moment of ceasefire was now over with the defeat of the mages. I have no desire to gain my title back. All I want to do is fight and become the strongest White Dragon Emperor to ever live. HMPH, hiding behind that woman while she did all the work doesn't back your claim. Issei shot back. His eyes were narrowed and his teeth grit. No one could see his face, but his tone and body language told 1,000 words. I had no reason to assist her as it was her own choice to do something foolish. Wasn't she your comrade though? Why hide when she at least stood her ground to the very end? I would not allow her foolish actions to affect me. Her rash actions warranted death. Vali said back, an ice-cold glare leveled at the brunette. It only brightened the fire in Issei's eyes. So you'd let your comrades die. You could have done anything to help and yet you sat there and did nothing. Flashes of white began to appear in Issei's mind. The first showed Issei when he was stabbed by Raynor. It showed his last moments before the sudden flash of red came that was Rias saving him. Flash. The second was Issei holding Asia, just after she died. Tears were flowing down his face as he cried out for her. Flash. The third was during the raiding game. It was when Kaneko was blasted by Ubaluna in a surprise attack. He held her injured body, fear for her safety evident on his face just before she disappeared in his arms. Flash. The fourth was Akeno. She was defeated by her fellow queen, having lost by Phoenix tears. The pained and hurt look on her face as she fell from the sky was still in the back of Issei's mind. Flash. The fifth was Kiba. The moment Ubaluna struck again just after they defeated a large portion of Razor's remaining pieces. Flash. The final was at the end of Kakabiel and his fight. The look of fear and horror on Kusha's face when the warmonger drove his spear through Issei. It was a look he never wanted to see again. One he never wanted anyone to make ever again. These memories were constant reminders of how he was weak. How he was unable to save those he thought of as friends and family. The ones who he let down because he didn't push himself. Issei realized the reason he was so angry at Vali. It was because he had the power to do something and didn't. The pawn growled as he could see Vali didn't care who got hurt so long as he achieved what he sought for. It made Issei sick. The brunette grit his teeth tighter and felt the anger building inside of him more and more. The Hakuryukoi spoke so casually about things that put people's lives at stake. What if one of those casualties were Ladora? Or Asia? Or Irina? Or any of his family? His mom or dad? Or, what if it was Kusha? Ooh. A deep rumbling sound filled the courtyard silence. Everyone could feel the very grounds themselves vibrating from a sudden intrusion of a new force. Chunks of rock danced up and down, while the trees surrounding the area began to shake back and forth in a manner unnatural. Issei floated just above the ground, his head lowered and arms to his side. Green sparks of electricity began to dance around the boy. The dirt beneath his feet blowing out in rings around him. What is this feeling? Serziches asked aloud. Everyone was thinking the same thing, their eyes glued to Issei. CRK. A crack appeared on the dragon armor. CRK. CRK. Two more followed behind it. One on the left gauntlet, just right of the green gem. The other forming across the helmet, between the eyes. CRRRK. The next one was a large crack that shot diagonally across his chest plate. It stretched from the ball of his shoulder down to just above his hip. Everyone watched in silence. None of them could say a word even if they wanted to. The power that was coming from Issei had any form of speech caught in their throat. And the fact that his armor looked to be breaking under such a power increase was unheard of. People lost their lives. So many people. Many you were supposed to call comrades. Issei spoke, his voice a very scary calm. Volley seemed unaffected by it. Mere pawns to a bigger picture. A bigger picture, you say? The Silverette could feel the brunette's power rising higher. His smile got wilder, more excited, more exhilarated as he could feel his rival's emotions fueling the aura. He, too, couldn't help raising his at the anticipation of the massive fight about to ensue. Tell me, Volley. Does this bigger picture have you in it? Issei asked ominously. The fellow dragon's grin widened. He was ready. Of course. Why wouldn't it? Because you're going to die here. It was then that Serzich's eyes widened along with the other leaders. Azazel, on the other hand, couldn't help his curiosity light up again as stars twinkle in his eyes. His grin stretched from ear to ear as his anticipation made him very excited. Everyone get back. The redeeted Mao shouted. No one argued and was quick to fall behind the leaders before they created another barrier. Ani-sama. Rias whispered. She noticed a serious look on his face. More so than when Kateria first made her appearance. He wasn't as concerned with the deceased Leviathan as he was now with the inevitable battle between the two dragons. Rias, stay behind me. If you get too close, their auras will reduce you to nothing. He warned. The heir said nothing and looked over to Issei once again. The cracks were spreading more and more across his body, and the lightning sparked longer and more frequently. Even though she was behind the powerful barrier, she could still feel the draconic energy swelling around her former pawn. For him to have attained such a feat of power, Rias could say she understood how bad of a mistake she made. Issei. CRRRRKKKKKKK. Fragments of the scale mail chipped out as the cracks grew. The bright green light shone through, blinding the group as the cracks extended. Issei held out his finger, pointing it at Volley, whose hands twitched with a readiness to finally fight. All of this for simple weaklings being sacrificed. I wonder if you'll get even stronger if I kill that blonde bishop. Oh, or possibly that woman who seems close to you. Kusha, right. The ground below Issei caved into a deep crater. The energy took a darker crimson color, now mixing with the green bolts. You've guaranteed death. Crack. The green light enveloped Issei completely as his armor shattered into tiny shards. The backlash of energy shot across the entire courtyard, obliterating the school building until nothing remained. The grounds beneath him shot up in massive chunks, lifting up roots and pipes along with it. The barrier that surrounded the school cracked and shook, but held together with what little strength it had left. Amidst all of this, a lone governor could be seen laughing. He stood inside his own barrier, looking at the explosion of energy with complete fascination. Never before had he witnessed such a thing before. No books, no matter the surplus amount he read, had any mentioning of such a thing before. Not even Volley, the projected strongest white dragon emperor, had achieved such an evolution in his sacred gear before. And, as such, his curiosity and anticipation for the final results matched that of the Silverette, who was a catalyst to call forth such a change in the brunette. After 30 seconds, the light began to fade. PMPH. Volley had been unprepared for the attack. He had severely underestimated the speed and power of his opponent. His anticipation had clouded his judgment of the enemy. And his desire to fight left him without an actual plan or counterattack. Looking down, Volley came face to face with the evolutionized Issei Haidu. The brunette had red scales on his cheek and neck. Few of his teeth looked sharper, giving him fangs, and his eyes were now slit like a reptile. His nails were also sharper, taking on a reptile's claws. His armor had completely disappeared, and his shirt from the meeting was now shredded and wrapped around his waist by a few threads, leaving him with only his pants and shoes. This form. Such power. Volley said with genuine praise. Looking at him, the pawn looked to be between evolutions, as if it was an incomplete form. And yet he had so much strength behind that one punch. The Silverette looked down. The spot where the brunette's punch landed had completely destroyed his armor. It was long after that something raced up his throat, and the Lucifer descendant coughed up a decent amount of blood. It had been some time since he last bled. I'll make sure you regret ever trying to harm any of my friends again. Issei stated coldly. Ascalon. SHKK. The Hakurikoi's eyes widened to full size. At the call of the red dragon, an unbearable pain filled his entire being. His eyes fell to the source of the burning pain, and his mouth fell open from it. In Issei's hand, the holy dragon slaying sword lied. And it was stabbed directly into the gut of the Silverette. He was caught completely off guard and hadn't expected for a fellow dragon to wield a weapon that was deadly to their kind. He had no words for this and, for once in a long time, didn't feel so confident. Issei only looked at him with cold eyes. He kicked his rival off the blade, sending the dragon to the floor. He swiped his blade to the side, splattering the blood that stained it into a crescent on the ground. You talk of pawns being sacrificial pieces, and how the weak are only here to die to the strong. Issei spoke as he slowly walked towards his enemy. No one made a move, not even Azazel, everyone stunned from the change in Issei's personality. He wasn't the same from before. The Sairaorg stood above the Hakuryuku, his eyes piercing into his opponent's. Vali stared back, pain clear on his face. The brunette didn't care and placed his foot directly on the spot where the wound was. His response was a grunt of pain from the Lucifer. Now, you'll know how it feels to die by someone who is both a pawn and was called weak by everyone around him. Issei rose the blade, ready to plunge it directly into the dragon's heart. His grip tightened and his muscles tensed as he prepared to drive it through. Issei. He heard Kusha shout. The brunette's eyes widened as he knew of her warning. He leapt back just in time before a figure landed directly where he had stood. Bali, I've come for you. Came a cheerful voice. The dust quickly settled to reveal a young man wearing armor that used to be worn by military commanders of the Three Kingdoms. He also had a long wooden staff in his hand, holding it behind his head and across his shoulders. Seems I've arrived at time. You look like you've bitten off more than you can chew, haha. Bhikkhu, I suppose I owe you one. But what are you doing here? Vali asked, still with pain evident in his voice. He had slowly risen, holding his wound with a hand over it. Isn't that cruel? I made a long journey and came all the way to this island country because my partner was close to dying. The other guys were making a fuss at headquarters because we're joining together to fight the northern country gods. You were supposed to flee and return right away if the mission failed, right? Kateria failed to assassinate Michael, Azazel, and Lucifer, right? In that case, your observation role is also over. Come back with me. Bhikkhu explained with a pout, leaving Vali to lower his head and close his eyes. He grunted at the searing pain of his wound. It seemed he definitely had underestimated his opponent. Yes, I would say I've overstayed my welcome. Who are you? Issei asked the new arrival. Descendant of the victorious fighting Buddha, Son Goku. Name's Bhikkhu, pleasure Sairaorg. The monkey man replied, still as carefree as ever. So you're related to the Son Goku. Issei wanted to be in awe, but the situation didn't call for it. Especially since he still wanted to kill the man hiding behind the staff wielder. I'm different from my ancestor, who had became a god. I just live doing as I please as that is my dream. Bhikkhu replied, waving lackadaisical. Enough. It's time to go. I must get this treated. Vali ordered, grunting as the dragon-slaying properties lit him up with pain once more. You think I'm going to let you go? Issei asked, lifting Ascalon once more. It was then that he felt a hand on his shoulder and looked to see Azazel. The fallen gave him an uncharacteristically serious expression that warned him from attacking. During that time, the monkey Yaokai slammed his staff into the ground. A black portal appeared below the duo's feet and the two sunk into the earth. Their eyes locked with Issei's once more, the brunette begrudgingly letting them go. But the fire roared even brighter behind the eyes of both dragons. It was obvious that their rivalry would be a destructive one. Once they were gone, Issei released his new form and Ascalon disappeared along with it. He stared at where his rival was a few seconds ago and could still feel his blood boiling. His words of threat towards Kusha rang in his ears and a deep possessiveness rose inside him like no other. He clenched his fist and his jaw tightened. The pawn came to a quick conclusion and made a promise to himself the very second the thought crossed his mind. No one will take her away from me. No one. Azazel, why did you stop me? Issei turned to the fallen with a sharp glare. One that still held that intense fire behind those hazel orbs. Azazel swore he saw a hint of green. Whoa kid, easy, I'm not Vali. I'm not going to hurt your woman. The governor replied with raised hands. He even looked back at Kusha, mentally approving the Sairaorg and his tastes. The brunette tried to snap back, but paused. He realized his thoughts had led him to think and say a few possessive things about his fellow member. But he didn't know how Kusha felt and had been talking as if their feelings were mutual. His eyes flashed over to Rias, who was looking over Gasper, and he remembered how, even in the end, gestures weren't a confession. That kiss that fateful night proved that fact. He then looked back to the blonde queen and felt his heart tightened in a vice. Could those gestures simply be the same? Something that would be seen as simply platonic. She's not my woman. The pawn lowered his head with his hair shadowing his eyes. After beating the white one with ease, now, he looked completely defeated. His downtrodden mood was met with boisterous laughter and a hand placed firmly on his shoulder. He looked up at the governor, who looked to be amused by the conflicted boy. Hahaha, you've got a lot to learn about women. He said cryptically, squeezing the brunette's shoulder. It went over Issei's head as he cocked an eyebrow. Listen, not all of them are the same. Some may surprise you in ways you wouldn't expect. You're dodging my question. Issei spoke up, trying to get the topic off of him. Heh, you caught my ploy. Azazel said, retracting his hand. What you were about to do. Call it reassurance. Reassurance? For what? The governor's expression then grew serious. So that you don't do something you regret. Issei went to speak but bit his tongue just before he did. Those words made him pause before he opened his mouth. The seraph noticed it and nodded his head. Smart boy. I understand you're trying to protect your friends, but what you were about to do wasn't that. Azazel stated, folding his arms. You had him beaten, there wasn't much he could do after that. Vali is strong, but Ascalon is a very powerful sword that was made to fight dragons. The mages with Kateria, you acted in self-defense against. Vali, you knew you had already beaten him. He deserved it. I acted in self-defense against him as well. Did you? Or were you really looking for a reason to plunge that sword into the retreating enemy? Issei knitted his brows. Then, they started to relax as he started to think rationally. As he thought more on the fallen angel's words, the more they made sense to him. Anyone who has ever killed out of aggression has never been the same afterwards. Hell, killing in general changed a person. And, now that he thought about it, he slowly realized that Vali was beat. He saw hatred in the half-devil but also fear. His fellow dragon would be cautious from this point forward and wouldn't challenge him the same again. As long as Issei could avoid senseless killing, then he could admit he overstepped a line this time. He was lucky for the fallen angel's concern. I see what you mean. Thank you, Azazel. He said in response. Forget about it. Pay me back by letting me see more of that new form later on. It caught my interest and that, in itself, is quite the compliment. Azazel started to walk away, waving a hand lazily over his shoulder. A magic circle appeared beneath his feet, starting to glimmer in what was teleportation magic. I'm heading home, kid. Try to stay out of trouble till we meet again. Oh, and do make sure to think over what I said. Shin. With that, the magic circle lit up and faded away, taking the Gremorys leader with it. The other fallen angels did the same, leaving the angels and devils to their own devices. The next to come towards the pawn was the leader of heaven. Issei Haidu. They greeted with the same kindness from their first encounter. Lord Michael. The boy replied with a head nod. I must say, that new form is something to behold. Heaven's leader said with a gentle smile. Thank you. I don't know how it happened but it felt right shedding that armor. Issei said, finding momentary difficulty in how to describe what he experienced from the change. I see. It is something that none of us have seen from any of the past boosted gear wielders. I can only hope you continue to use it to do amazing things. The Archangel encouraged. Your words are too kind. That attack against Vali only worked because he underestimated me and because of Ascalon. Issei replied. He'd rather not have what happened from Kakabiel happen again. He got lucky, that was it. He still had a lot of training to do before he reached his goal, and people getting the wrong idea would cause future problems he didn't want to deal with at the moment. If not at all. Haidu-kun, Ascalon is a powerful sword, yes, but its true power lies within the wielder themselves. Michael spoke sage-like. Someone of the Hakuryukoi strength could take multiple strikes and still be able to fight. But for you to have him retreat with the little you did, it speaks volumes of your connection to the holy sword. It was the best decision to give it to you. Issei's eyes widened at the kind words. The leader of heaven believed in him. His smile was genuine and his words were very comforting. It was almost unbelievable that they were supposed enemies before. But it seemed he, along with the other leaders, truly wanted this piece to work. Such actions as gifting him the sword and working together against a common enemy made it easy for even a simpleton, like Issei, to understand. Thank you, Lord Michael. You are very welcome. May you continue on your path to a higher resolution in life. Issei nodded his head vigorously. Looking back at the angel, Issei then noticed something move behind the leader. When he saw what it was, more specifically who, he thought on something before looking up with added resolve. Lord Michael, if you would please hear the request of this lowly devil. What is it, my son? The archangel showed intrigue after noticing the look in the pawn's eyes. Issei motioned him closer, Michael complying. He leaned in and whispered something into the leader's ear. The angel nodded every few seconds before his eyes finally widened. A smile quickly followed as he pulled away. I see. I do believe it is something within my power. Is that all you truly desire? He asked. The boy nodded immediately and his smile widened. You are truly kind, Issei Haidu. If I heard you that night, I would have rescued you myself without hesitation. Your words comfort me, Lord Michael. But I feel it's my obligation to do so. I can only imagine all that she's been to up to this point. Yes. And I still regret what I had done. But I'm glad to know that she has someone like you watching over her. Thank you. They shared a smile. Well, it is time for me to return to heaven. I do wish you luck in all that you do, Haidu-kun. And hope that, with this alliance, we all grow closer and stronger together. Likewise. And with that, a bright golden light enveloped Michael and all of the other angels. And, like Azazel, they were gone once it faded. All that was left were the devils. Issei made his way over to the one person he had been meaning to talk to. It had been some time and he was sure she had a lot to say to him now. Especially with all that's transpired. Step. Asia. He said softly, stopping a few feet away from her. The former nun looked back at him. She had been waiting patiently to talk with him since she heard of his return during Kakabiel's attack. Then when he appeared at Kuo Academy during the parents' visitation, she grew upset that she missed him again. And now, she had waited the entire meeting and the invasion to finally be able to speak with him. The bishop had finally witnessed how much the boy had changed. Not just with his strength but mentally as well. He wasn't as perverted anymore, nor was he childish. He had matured and had goals that someone could actually be proud of. Other than himself, of course. And all of that made her realize just how far he got from her. Both in power and as a person. She had been training diligently to try and be more useful, but she could only do so much with her fellow peerage members. And even with all of that, she still found herself leagues behind the one she was trying to aim for. It made her question if she really deserved to be by his side. So, when he opened his arms and smiled at her, she felt her legs grow weak and her eyes sting and moisten. She leapt towards him without a second thought and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Issei. San," she replied carefully. His smile widened and he nodded. Drip. Her tears started to spill as she saw that same warmth from the day she was revived in the church. She dug her face into his chest, uncaring of the fact he still lacked a shirt, as she cried. The brunette didn't seem to mind it, as he simply soothed her by rubbing the top of her head. "I know. I'm sorry for ignoring you all this time," he said gently. Issei hadn't realized how much he missed her. How much he missed the one he swore to protect at all costs. The one he risked everything to save. The one who called him her first friend. The one who accepted being a devil just so she could be with him. He never blamed her for what happened to him. He didn't blame her for not saying anything that fateful day he was traded. Even he knew at the time, her words would do nothing to sway Rias at the time. So he couldn't be angry at her, not like he could anyways. He could never be angry towards Asia. And with the way she hugged him, the way she was shedding those tears, the way she clung to him, it only solidified it. She missed him too. "I'm sorry, Issei-san. I'm sorry." She continued to cry out. He just held her, soothing her the best he could. "I know, Asia. I'm sorry too." Zoxoxoxoxdoon. The building shook violently, breaking Issei from his thoughts. He looked back to the ending of the meeting again. He had been thinking about it since that day, focusing on everyone's words. The words of his superiors made him really question where he was at and how much stronger he would have to get. He wanted to stand on par with them and possibly surpass them one day. A gold raid was quick to get behind. And, with that in mind, he decided to up his training. His training with Ladora and Gandoma had become much more intense. Ladora now used his dragon form, and Gandoma solidified his defenses by summoning the rocks beneath him as reinforced armor. They would then begin to spar, 2-on-1 of course, till Issei's scale mail shattered. Then he was to resummon it and they would start again. He was able to do it 2 more times but was extremely exhausted afterwards. They were on a limited time, after all, and Issei was doing his best to first master the scale mail before trying to utilize his new form. It was still an unstable state and he needed to grow stronger first. Liban and Baruka had also upped their training regimen with the pawn. Now, with Ascalon, they had no fear of shattering the boy's blade in their duels. They made sure to advise against using his scale mail form so he wouldn't become reliant on it. As much as Issei hated that, they made a valid point that he wouldn't always have his armor as a secondary defense. So, it was better he got used to defending and deflecting attacks without having to fall back on the armor to protect him. Finally, Miss Tita and Coriana would finish off his training. After Issei's new evolution, they noticed an increase in his magic reserves. With this, they immediately began to have Issei meditate and learn to tap into the new reservoir of energy. It was also unstable, having come from his new evolution, so they couldn't do much, but it was something that, with time, could turn Issei into an unstoppable force on the battlefield. With careful instruction, they made sure he only got used to the feeling of the new power flowing through him, but advised against him doing anything dangerous with it. Everyone was excited for the brunette. His rapid growth was extremely motivating to the group and no one wanted to be left behind. So, not only did it increase the morality of the team, but also increased the overall strength of the entire peerage. No one would allow themselves to be beaten by the other and they grew as a unit, training together. Duon. Another explosion broke the boy's thoughts. He really needed to stop daydreaming. At least in situations like this. "This is why I didn't want us to gather before the meeting." Issei heard Sairaorg complain. The peerage had originally decided to stand outside until the situation resolved itself. But, with the arrival of the Gremory and Citri heiresses, Issei could assume his king had enough. So, now the 3 kings and their peerages made their way into the banquet hall to see how much trouble the ones inside had caused. The Citri and Gremory groups both had wide eyes as they took in the destruction of the room. Tables were destroyed, chairs were broken, and the decorations on the wall were either ripped, burning, or smoking. All in all, the place was a complete mess. At the center, devils looked to be split in half and glaring at one another. One side had human-like devils, while the other had more goblin-like devils. The pointy ears, jagged teeth, and even a wart or two on some. Leading on both sides were two devils. Both kings, like the Issei, Gremorys, and Bael. On the former's side, a young woman with blonde hair and red eyes sat at a table. She sipped on a cup of tea calmly while the chaos ensued around her. She seemed mostly undisturbed by it all, albeit a look of irritation on her face. Across from her, on the latter side, a delinquent stood against her. He had dark skin with blue hair. And he wore an outfit that Issei swore looked like a unicorn took a shit on. No one in their right mind would be caught dead in it. And he was wearing it and alive, so what did that say about him? Oh, they're arguing. Zephyr, you're causing a disturbance. Honestly, you need to calm down. The girl berated. She wore glasses and they had that ominous glare that would make any man freeze in his tracks. Of course, her fellow devil was unaffected by it. Shut your mouth, bitch agares. You're all hot shit because your family is second to the great kings, huh? Is that why you reek of virgin? Such vulgarity comes from your mouth. Maybe I should fuse it shut. Is it because of this attitude that you can't get a man? If you'd ask nicely, maybe I can show you the wiles of adulthood. Issei didn't like this guy. Although, it seemed no one really did. But he really didn't like him because he spoke so perversely. Was that really how he was before? You have no idea. Shut it. You've been quiet for a long time, stay quiet. Sairaorg stepped forward, catching the brunette's attention. The heir cracked his knuckles and neck, his eyes narrowed. Guess it was time to end the debacle. Zephyr glacial abolas, I'll ask that you not speak to my fiancé with such a tone. The Bael heir spoke up. There was no room for an argument in that sentence. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Heh, you two. Haha, it makes sense then. You both always seem to have sticks up your asses, so it's perfect. The dark-skinned teen seemed to not pick up on the tension building. Issei could see the look in his king's eyes and was quite surprised to see such a look of anger. He could tell his master didn't take kindly to someone mocking someone he cared about. I'll kick your ass then take Sairaorg and show her what a real man. Go on. Crack. The goblin devil couldn't even finish his sentence. The moment he spoke of the Aegir's heiress, Sairaorg moved and buried his fist deep into the boy's gut. He was further embarrassed when the heir sent the delinquent flying into the wall. It was obvious Zephyr had lost consciousness by the fact his eyes were rolled into the back of his head. His peerage was forced to remove him from the wall and carry him off to be treated. The Bael had barely held back and might have broken a rib or two. But it was better than what he originally wanted to do. I take it you have nothing to say? He asked, turning to the blonde heiress. No, he was bothering me and I simply wanted him gone. Thank you. Sairaorg replied, setting her teacup down. Alright. Have everyone repair the hall. I'd rather not have a mess before the mass and elders arrive. Sairaorg nodded her head. As you wish, my love. The little teasing tone she had made one of Sairaorg's eyebrows twitch. But he then closed his eyes and smiled. Sairaorg Aegir's of the Aegir's household. Rank, Archduke. Rias Gremory of the Gremory household. Rank, Duke. Sona Issei of the Issei household. Rank, Prince. Sairaorg Bael of the Bael household. Rank, Great King. Diodora Astaroth of the Astaroth household. Rank, Duke. Good, with introductions out of the way, we can finally talk freely. Sairaorg said with a grin. Yes, we had quite the interesting start, so to say. Diodora added. I agree. But I'm to assume Zephyr won't be a problem for the remainder of this meeting? Sairaorg asked. No, he is unconscious and doesn't look to be waking up anytime soon. So he was sent home. Sona informed, pushing her glasses back up the bridge of her nose. I see. The blonde replied, doing the same. Still, we must take it easy on him. His family is going through a recent loss, if I remember correctly. Diodora spoke up. The other young devils looked as if they remembered too. Ah, yes, that is very true. The death of the former heir might have taken a toll on him. Sona thought aloud. Then I may be able to excuse his attitude tonight. But only once. That delinquency will not be tolerated by the elders or myself. Sairaorg stated with a firm fist planted on the table. Ah, so you kids have been quite busy, A new voice joined the fray. Everyone turned to see Surziches smiling at them and their eyes widened. Mausama. Zoxox after the meeting had concluded, devils started taking their leave. The mass and elders were first, seeing as they still had many tasks left to complete. Diodora and Sona weren't too far behind, the latter wanting to get an early start on her training for the upcoming raiding game against her best friend. Issei had found himself wandering off. It had been difficult for him since his return to the underworld. More specifically, the words of a certain governor. Azazel had spoken to him about his relationship with Kusha. But it left the brunette more confused than at ease. And why shouldn't it? It seemed that women didn't take kindly to him at all. At least, once they got to know him. Since he started high school, women hated his guts. Teachers, students, faculty, moms, sisters, there wasn't a single female who found interest in him but to see what his head would look like on a pike. But the pawn would chalk that up to his perverted tendencies. Looking back at it, he did come off as stalkerish and creepy. In all honesty, he should have been arrested. One of the main examples, however, was when Yuma no Rainer had shown up. After she had asked him out, Issei made a promise to himself. He wasn't going to do anything perverted on their first date. No leering, no groping, no creeping, none of that. He was going to be a gentleman. Much like Kiba, in fact. And, lo and behold, by the end of the day he had a light spear stabbed through him. He was called boring and drab and was left for dead in a park. That should have been it. No, of course not though. Rias had revived him and made him into her pawn. He called out for someone to save him and she did. She knew of his perverted tendencies, who didn't, but allowed him to indulge in them nonetheless, albeit with a grain of salt. She even went as far as to save his friend, revive her, and rid him of the woman who broke his heart. Issei had assumed those actions were Ria's way of showing that she accepted him. And from that point on his heart had started to heal. The brunette began to train and grow stronger, all with the idea of pleasing his master in mind. Hoping she would notice him and smile that same smile that gave him life once more. That she may be proud of him and never regret her decision. Then, Razor came along. He claimed her as his fiancée and those of the devil world accepted it. Seeing the freedom she usually displayed be slowly sucked out of the woman he had come to adore, it enraged him. He saw the displeasure on her face and how no one seemed to care or be able to do anything about it. His words had carried no weight either. But they were given a chance to help her. Issei prepared himself to fight for her as she had for him. To rid her of such an awful man that was Razor Phoenix. And, for the first time in Issei's life, he hated a fellow pervert. Then they failed. No, Issei had failed. The boy told himself that he didn't try hard enough. That he didn't give it his all during training. That everyone was counting on him and he let them all down. Because he was weak and just a mere low-class devil. So he sacrificed a piece of himself. He sacrificed his arm just to have a slim chance at saving her. He sacrificed his heart to her, hoping to communicate his admiration towards her in this last burst of effort to free her. And he sacrificed what was left of his already shattered pride in an attempt to make sure no one tried to come after his master again. And he won. Issei beat Razor. Despite using a cross and holy water, he had won. He saved his king, he saved her freedom, and he saved that smile. And he was rewarded with a kiss that meant more than anything in his life. A kiss that he had hoped would lead to what he had been wanting for all those years. Love. Love that showed he belonged somewhere. With someone. To be with till the end of time. Issei simply wanted to be loved. The only reason he spoke of a harem as he did was because he wanted a lot of it. His parents weren't the kindest when he was younger and he was starved of what one would call love. His grandfather was the only one, and he told Issei of this mysterious emotion that gave people the power to change reality itself, all for the sake of this one other person. Issei wanted to have that kind of love with many others, and it morphed him into the harem king dreamer he once was. But, all those dreams had come crashing down in smoke and fire. He came to the club in bright spirits to leave in low depression. His master, his savior, had called him out on luck and cheap tactics, and wanted nothing to do with him. So she cast him aside, traded him away to try and right what she thought was wrong. And, with such an action, had unknowingly shattered Issei's still mending heart into dust. But with it, his aspiration of any female actually finding any affection towards him had been imprisoned in the recesses of his mind. Issei. He had been caught off guard again. His daydreaming was becoming a real problem. He turned to the person behind him and was quite surprised at who he saw. Ayakeno. Senpai. The beautiful woman was dressed in a stunning elegant kimono. It fit her perfectly and embellished her beauty flawlessly. Issei would be speechless by the attire if not concerned by the worried look he saw on her face. Issei. You're. The pawn was confused until he finally felt a wetness on his face. He reached up to his cheek before pulling his hand back to look at it. A few droplets of a clear liquid sat at his fingertips before sliding down and dropping off. Drip. And then he realized it and his eyes widened. Issei was crying. Issei quickly wiped his tears, turning away from his former senior. Well, technically she was still his senior devil at least. Issei. You're crying. She said from behind him. He could hear the heels of her shoes clicking as they grew closer to him. They rung in his ears like warning bells, drowning out any thoughts in his head. The brunette turned to face her. She was already in his personal space once he did, and one of her hands shot to his cheek. She wiped a stray tear and glanced at it before looking back at him. Issei, why are you crying? She asked, sounding sincere. Genuinely sincere. The boy paused for a moment. He didn't expect such a tone from the queen. Usually she was flirty, sadistic, or just plain playful. But she sounded so concerned that for half a second Issei almost told her what was on his mind. Almost. Just before he opened his mouth, Issei looked down at her, his eyes locked on hers. He noticed he had grown taller than her by an inch or two. Looking at her, Issei noticed the glass expression on her face. The same one she usually had towards anyone other than Rias and the others. The same look Rias had when she was dealing with people she didn't care for. The same one both women had always given him when he was around, being an idiotic pervert. Swat. The pawn batted the woman's hand away. Akeno was shocked by the action. She shouldn't have been after seeing how Issei had changed. Just standing there she could feel the difference between the Issei she used to know and the Issei now. But still, seeing the former ultra-pervert shoot her hand away. Issei, I'm trying to. You hide your emotions every day, senpai. How can you try to understand when you bury your past behind the woman who saved you? Issei spoke heavily. Yeah, Aniki told me. Former fallen angel, now devil. Your mother's family turned against you, killed her and hunted you. Ria saved you, risking herself by entering a territory considered hostile against her kind. Issei looked away, pausing. But after a few seconds glanced back from the corner of his eye. I'm curious to know such a caring side of your king. Akeno's eyes, if they weren't wide already, were full on dinner plates now. Just from what he said and how he said it, Akeno found herself blindsided by the boy. You see, you were saved and gifted a choice. Yet you felt you owe your life to Rias and joined her. Issei sighed and closed his eyes. Issei. I'm not done. He firmly cut her off, assertiveness in his voice that sent a shiver to the queen's very core. You, Kaneko, Kiba, even Gasper, and Ikki told me about all of you. Your pasts, the paths you walked, all things that led you to Rias. The woman who saved you when you were a young fallen angel. The possible enemy to come, many other devils would have left you to die. Akeno's words were caught in her throat. The entire reason she came towards Issei was to try and talk with him. To gauge who he had become and possibly tap into who he once was. But now, in a spur of events, she was the one being picked apart. Her past exposed, her fears brought forward, and the possibility of ridicule for what she was. It actually brought a look of fear on her face. As, for once in a long time, she felt afraid. Inhale. Exhale. However, she accepted you as you were and gave you a chance at a new life. He muttered. Akeno looked at him with a perplexed expression. She had braced herself to hear him call her a coward, an embarrassment, a weakling. But he did none of those things. In fact, it was almost like he was comforting her. She focused back to see his features had softened. He wasn't angry, or sad, or annoyed. He was calmer despite the tense stance he still possessed. Senpai, you were a fallen angel and she took you in. Kaneko was a Nekashu and she took her in. Kiba, a former devout Christian follower, she took him in. Gasper, a bastard Damfer, she took him in. She accepted all of you despite the traumas of your past and the weaknesses you all possessed. Issei moved past the queen and began to walk away. But he stopped with a hint of hesitation holding him just at her side. So how do you think I would feel when after I was betrayed by my girlfriend? Stabbed, killed, revived, and almost killed again. Saved by her grace. Only to be stabbed again. How do you think I felt, having not been accepted after I put my all out there for that woman? Simply because I was given the same chance as all of you and because she couldn't accept my flaws. He took a step. Rias regrets what she did to you. There was a pause for half a second. It's too late for regret. Would you have accepted us the way that we were, had you been in her position? Akeno shouted, turning to face him. He kept his back to her and didn't even look over his shoulder. His body relaxed at her question and confused her by the change from his originally tension. I accepted all of you the moment you came to help me at the church. He answered. Then he casted a look back at her and, for the first time, smiled. Akeno-senpai is Akeno-senpai. Fallen angel, devil, angel, yaokai, none of it matters. I liked you for you. Thump. With that, he turned around and walked away leaving Akeno standing there. She didn't try to stop him. Her eyes stayed fixed on his back, watching as he joined Kusha's side and bumped a shoulder into her playfully. They shared a laugh together before moving to join with the rest of the peerage, leaving Akeno at the end of the hall alone. She lowered her head to look at the floor, finding the shiny tile interesting. The pawn's words played in her head over and over again. That smile had etched itself into her memory. His soft and reassuring tone she had embedded into her mind. And her rapidly beating heart filled her ears, along with a warm feeling that filled her chest. Akeno rose a hand over her heart, the hard pounding ringing from her palm to her fingertips. Ara, saying such things to a weakened opponent. Zoxox. So I'm never going back to school, huh? Issei chided with a deadpan expression. Being a peerage member of a high-class devil comes with situations like this, Issei. Sairaorg replied from behind his desk. The school understands the importance of what we do and excuses you from your prolonged absence. Which is why I've tutored you in our spare time to try and keep you up to date. I guess I can understand that. But still, I'd like to finish high school first and foremost. Issei replied, rubbing his arm. I promised my parents I'd do well. Understandable. School is on summer break so there are no immediate worries at this very moment. The Bael replied. And we'll continue to do our lessons when you return. Issei smiled softly. Thanks, Aniki. No need to thank me, Ice. I appreciate all the hard work you've done since joining. You've come a long way since then. Thanks. There was a pause between the two. A good one that they both welcomed happily. But they had a briefing to finish discussing. So, what is the mission? Issei finally asked. It is a very important one. It was given to me by the Mau, Leviathan Sama. Sairaorg answered. This made Issei's eyes widen slightly. A mission given by a Mau was very important. And one coming from the Mau of diplomatic affairs meant possibly dealing with another faction. Why is Leviathan Sama requesting me? Issei asked. It's not by request of Leviathan Sama. But of the Pantheon requesting the mission. You mean? It's a request from a group of gods. Issei asked. The heir nodded his head. Which Pantheon would require my assistance personally? The Greeks. The Greek gods. The likes of Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and many others. Why would they want me? The mission is something they only want to tell you, so it's not specified. However, in the file it says that it involves the hacker Yuku. I'm going. Issei immediately replied. It surprised the heir on how quickly he had responded. The clear and firm tone he used was still new to Sairaorg and his brows knitted with concern. Ice, are you thinking of going after Vali? The Bael asked. The pawn said nothing but the fire in his eyes gave him his answer. Issei, I cannot condone you going if your reasoning is to try and hunt down your rival. It says he is involved, not the main target. But Aniki, whatever he's doing can't be good. He was the reason the terrorist attacked the meeting in the first place. Issei argued back. I understand that, Issei. But that was then and this is now. You need to focus on the mission at hand or I will have to deny this request. The Bael stated. His eyes were narrowed and his voice was firm. Issei stared back with defiance. With Vali involved, Issei wanted to get involved immediately. He no longer questioned the motives of why the assignment was given to him. If the Silverette had anything to do with it, Issei needed no other influence to go after him. After his fight with the fellow dragon at the meeting, Issei knew it was only the beginning of their encounters. He and Vali were fated to fight, or so the saying goes. Would Issei believe that? No. But if the gods of another faction were requesting his assistance against a boy, he wouldn't deny his chance to stop him from harming others. Luckily, Azazel's words still clung to him as well. Whatever Vali has done, he's crossed a few lines he can't come back from. Issei would be lying if he said he hasn't done the same. The difference between the two is Issei knew what Vali was doing wasn't for anyone else's benefit but his own. And that meant that he didn't care who could get hurt along the way. Issei wouldn't allow that. I will be going with him, Sairaorg-sama. A new voice spoke up. The two men looked back at the door to see Kusha leaning against a doorframe. Issei's eyes narrowed. Kuikai, you can't. Vali. I know, Issei. I was there, remember? The queen reminded as she walked into the room. Then you should know why I don't want you going. Issei replied. Oh please, and let you go out there by yourself and get killed. She asked back. Issei's eyes narrowed, the fire in his eyes growing dangerous and wild. I beat him once, I'll do it again. Issei, you don't know what's out there. Kusha tried to reason. What if it's a trap? What if you get ambushed? The pawn clenched his fist. His nails dug into his skin and his knuckles turned white. It was obvious he wanted to go and fight his rival. The anger still burning inside him as he constantly remembered those words that set him off. I wonder if you'll get even stronger if I kill that blonde bishop. Oh, or possibly that woman who seems close to you. Kusha, right. Those words were burned into his memory. As a constant reminder that there were people who would go after those he cared for if it meant hurting him. With that, Issei feared for his loved ones and only wanted to protect them and keep them safe. To think, his first mission was to deal with the Silverette again. The one who threatened to the pawn's face that he'd kill someone precious to him. All for a fight. It only made him more paranoid and more likely to do something crazy. Issei swore if the half-devil even tried it, he'd kill him then and there. No consequences. No regrets. He would make him suffer and make sure every Hakuriku following him would fear the name Issei Haidu. Living almost forever was a lot of time to hunt each and every white dragon emperor that followed. Issei felt a hand touch his cheek. He shot from his thoughts and looked to see Kusha in front of him. Her eyes were filled with concern and her thumb rubbed against his cheek soothingly. Issei, Azazel talked about how you can't let your anger fuel you. She said gently. But Vali. Forget about him. she said sternly. Issei promptly shut his mouth from the force behind it. Issei, you have to remember, I'm not weak by any means. And I have you there with me, if he even tries anything. Issei could feel the tension leave him as she spoke. His eyes softened and his fists unclenched. She slowly calmed him, but just for a moment. But what about Asia? My parents. It's not just you but anyone who's close to me. He said, looking deep into her eyes for an answer. He wanted to be angry, but she wasn't allowing him to. So he looked to her to help him find an answer. Bali wouldn't dare attack anyone you love. Kusha reassured, a soft smile breaking through her concerned expression. The power you displayed has him scared. You and I both saw the fear in his eyes. Issei only saw the rage from the Silveret's humiliation. And with rage came vengeance. It was only a matter of time before he returned to take it. Whether it was directly on him or someone close. But Issei, going out of your way to look for him won't be good for your health. Especially when we don't know what his involvement in all of this is. Issei stared at her, still uncertain. Despite the reassuring look she gave him, the nagging feeling still itched at the back of his mind. The look of revenge in his eyes. He didn't seem like the type to have such underhanded tactics, but even still. The slim chance that he could and would left the boy uneasy. Another hand grabbed his other cheek. It forced him to focus back in on the blonde in front of him. His queen. His friend. His crush. She was just about his everything since they trained and did missions together. He couldn't help the blush from how little the proximity between them was. Issei, I promise you that if he comes back, we'll beat him together. And no matter what we face, I'll be right there with you. She said. She spoke strongly and with the most reassurance she could muster. She then did something neither of them expected and brought her forehead to his, touching bringing gently together. I promise. I'll always be there for you, Ice. My Ice. The last part was a hushed whisper that neither man had heard. But the gesture was more than enough to finally comfort the brunette. He wrapped his arms around her back and hugged her close as he relaxed deeper into her embrace. Okay. I believe you, Kuikai. Thank you. He replied, the want to smile tugging at his lips. The queen brought her head back a few inches to look up into the pawn's eyes. She no longer saw the wildfire and, instead, saw the calm pools of hazel that she found herself getting lost in, as of recent. Her heart quickened the longer she stared and her cheeks grew warmer as well. It was funny how Issei was the only man who could do this to her. And even funnier how she loved the new and weird feeling it gave her. Maybe he seems you two have grown extremely close in your time away. Sairaorg teased from behind them. Both were snapped from their trance and shot to face their king. He had an amused smirk as he rested his cheek on his fist. The duo were blushing furiously and found equal interests in the floor. They had let themselves become a bit too distracted and had forgotten where they were. All of that had just been put on like a drama show. All in front of their leader. I approve if you two decide to take things further. He further teased. Nikki. Issei shouted in embarrassment. Come on, Issei. She's exactly what you wanted in a woman. Her gliss figure, large breasts, perky posterior, and her homey personality matches to your chivalrous protective one perfectly. Aye. Issei couldn't form a response. His embarrassment left him tongue-tied. Unable to defend himself as his desires in a woman were put out to the one woman he wished didn't hear them. Yet, the brunette feared what the blonde's reaction would be. The grip tightened on his heart as he was reminded of the last 2 times his feelings were shattered from women he had grown affection for. And he knew that if Kusha denied his feelings, he would probably kill himself. Nothing would be left of his heart and his emotions would spiral out of control. He was 100% sure it would drive him to insanity and he would take his life at that very moment. Gathering his courage, the boy looked out the corner of his eye. He expected to see disgust, anger, maybe even pity. All reactions that would confirm his fear that she was not interested. But, to his surprise, he saw the woman blushing uncontrollably. Her eyes were wide, her cheeks were red, and she was visibly shaking ever so slightly. It was almost as if she was caught by surprise that Issei's quality traits in a woman matched who she was. Of course, to Issei, the nagging feeling that there was more to it pulled at him. He thought that maybe she was too embarrassed to deny the claims. Or that Sairaorg's teasing had left her unable to respond. Either way, the important question still rang in his head. Could she really like me? Ugh, you mortals and your emotions. Quiet you. Sairaorg's smirk widened. And Kusha, wasn't it you who? MMMF. The queen had moved faster than Issei had ever seen. Her hand covered the mouth of their king and her face was close to matching the Gremorys' hair. The heir looked surprised at first, but then his eyes squinted in amusement as the corners of his mouth stretched out in a grin. MMM. You promise? Kusha asked. Wait, she understood him. The Bael nodded his head and she removed her hand. He chuckled lightly, wiping the corner of his lip where a bit of sweat had formed. Kusha returned to Issei's side, avoiding eye contact with him as she tried to recollect herself. Alright, enough teasing then. You two will be leaving effective immediately after this debrief. Gather what you need and meet in the transport room. There we'll send you to Olympus. Oh, and do your best to earn their favor. More pantheons willing to join the treaty, the better. Hi. Zeus, he should have been here by now. Patience Hera, you must remember who we have requested. He's a low-class devil. It should be an honor to serve the gods of Olympus. Yes, but considering his feats in the short time he's been a devil, he has more than earned our respect and a little more time. The two gods continued to bicker back and forth. The first was the king of Olympus. He was a handsome man with long blonde hair and bronze eyes. He looked to be very young, rivaling Xerxes in looks. He had a thick goatee that covered his hardened face. And he also wore a red and white robe with a few accents of gold to highlight it. The second was the queen of Olympus. She, unlike her husband, was a mature, older yet elegant-looking woman. She was the epitome of a serene and beautiful woman with long white hair, fair skin, and light pink eyes. Her attire consisted of a beautiful violet sleeveless dress that showed off her curvaceous figure and royal stature. Flash. HMPH, about time. Hera muttered, folding her arms. Issei and Kusha appeared from the magic circle before it faded away. They looked around to find themselves in a large meeting hall, much like the one in Lucifid. They didn't look around too much as their eyes fixed on the two gods standing before them the second they arrived. They bowed in respect to the leaders of the Greek pantheon. Lord Zeus and Lady Hera. Kusha spoke first. Who are you? We only remember requesting the Red Dragon Emperor. Zeus spoke curiously. She is Kusha Abaddon, sir. She's my partner and I request that she join me in this mission. Issei answered, still bowing. I see. Move. Before Zeus could fully respond, his wife shoved him aside as she walked up to the duo. They rose their heads and locked eyes with the goddess, who looked like a woman on a mission. Her eyes were trained on both of them as she brought herself extremely close. Issei Haidu and Kusha Abaddon. She asked for clarification. Yes ma'am. Was Issei's short response. Hera continued to look between the two. Her eyes were narrowed as she glanced at him, then her. Back to him. And back to her. It was a long silence. One that made the devils nervous the more it prolonged. They didn't know why she was eyeing them up and down, and the king behind her did little to help them. He only shrugged in response before starting to pick his ear. Meanwhile, the goddess continued with what they assumed was an evaluation. You two are perfect. Hera exclaimed suddenly. Stars appeared in her eyes, and a large smile split across her face. It caught both queen and pawn off guard. Ea? Hera continued to smile brightly, beaming almost. The amount of giddiness in her completely took away from the stoic and serious look she had moments ago. But even this reaction still made the duo nervous. I can't believe it. Even devils can do it. Hera said happily as she spun around with a hum of triumph. I must call Aphrodite here at once. With that, the queen walked out the room with vigor. She left the remaining three to awkwardly watch as she left, still confused by her questionable antics. It was slightly unbecoming of the Queen of Olympus, after all. I apologize about her actions. She must have seen something between you two that set her off. Zeus apologized while rubbing his forehead. It's no big deal. Is she always like that? Issei asked with a sweat drop. No, but I'm to assume whatever she picked up, it was momentous. I haven't seen her that ecstatic about devils ever. The god explained. I see. Do we need her for the mission briefing? No, thank you for reminding me. Zeus replied. Now, I'm sure you're curious as to why I've called you here. Issei nodded his head. All I know is that Vali is involved. If you talk of the White Dragon Emperor, then yes. My messenger, Hermes, spotted him on one of his runs out across Greece. Why he's here, we don't know, but there is a stench in the air that has the gods a little on edge. It also gives me an idea of what they may be planning. What do you mean? Kusha asked. If my assumptions are correct, the Hakuryaku and possibly others are attempting to revive one of the evil dragons. What? Issei shouted. Through his own research of dragons, Issei had discovered the few powerful dragons in history. The heavenly dragons, the dragon kings. And the evil dragons. The last group was said to be above the dragon kings due to their lack of sanity and desire for brutal battles and bloodshed. The former strongest dragon king, Tannin, is an ultimate class devil, for comparison. Meaning the evil dragons could possibly be put above even that. Which dragon is it? Kusha asked. The only one of the Greek mythology, luckily. It would be the insomniac dragon, Ladon. Zeus answered. Why would you request me to fight an evil dragon? Issei asked. Wouldn't Tannin, or any of you guys, be better suited for this? There will be two gods joining you on this mission, it is our territory after all. But I chose you, Issei Haidu, because I heard of your strengths. Especially with how you defeated Vali. Ascalon is one of, if not the most powerful of the dragon-slaying blades. And with you wielding it, it's possible you can put a stop to whatever they're doing. Zeus praised before switching to a grim expression. As for why we cannot handle this personally, I have to have as many eyes as I can watching Hades currently. Hades. The ruler of Greek's underworld. Yes, he has been silent for quite some time. And while silence is usually bliss, it does not follow that code when it comes to my brother. He's a crafty god and I have reason to believe he may be involved in this somehow. I see. Then I'll respect your wishes and do what I can. The pawn replied. Zeus smiled for the first time. Thank you, young emperor. I will give you more details once the other two gods arrive. Which should be right about. Bang. Now. The doors to the hall burst open and the trio turned immediately. I told you we had to be here on time. Argued a woman. Well, I couldn't just leave my symphonies unfinished. I have a schedule to keep as well, mind you. Retorted a man. This isn't a meeting to push off, you idiot. This is an important mission in cooperation with another faction. Yes, I understand that. Which is why we're here and we'll get this done as soon as possible. Artemis, Apollo, you've arrived. Zeus greeted. Father. They both replied. Apollo was what anyone would imagine. He was a tall, young, and handsome man like his father. However, he was gifted with curly black hair and rare orange eyes that burned like the setting or rising sun. He was dressed in a male's chiton and brown sandals that were strapped up to his shins. Artemis was young-looking and beautiful woman. She had long, slightly curly violet hair that was tied back into a loose ponytail and sapphire blue eyes. She wore an elegant green dress that stopped at her thigh on one side and carried to her ankle on the other. Over that she wore light armor which consisted of a chest plate and arm guards. The twin gods turned their attention to Issei and Kusha. Both raised an eyebrow as they hadn't expected their companions to be children. Father. They are more than capable, Apollo. He already knew what they were thinking. Alright. The mission is simple. For now, find out where the source of the stench is coming from. Artemis, you're the leader due to your mastery in hunting. The woman nodded her head and took on a look of pride. She would not let her father down, especially when so much was at stake. The revival of an evil dragon could cause problems for Olympus and possibly her huntresses in turn. She would take care of this effective immediately. The objective is to find out if Layton is truly being revived. If he hasn't and you can handle the situation, stop them. If he's already revived or there are too many risks, fall back and report to me. Is that understood? Yes, father. Hi. The duos responded respectively. Zeus nodded his head and held out his hand towards the four. Lightning trickled between his fingers and it wasn't long before a cloud materialized at the devil's and god's feet. May the odds be in your favor. Strike. Lightning struck the four and they disappeared along with the cloud. Zeus lowered his hand and sighed. He could only hope his suspicions were wrong because if what his scouts had been telling him were true, all the pantheons may be in danger from the group known as Chaos Brigade. Boom. The doors burst open again and Hera walked in with another woman hot on her heels. When she saw that the only one in the hall was Zeus, her face scrunched up in anger. Zeus, where did they go? Hera demanded. The king had completely forgotten about his wife going to find the goddess of love, Aphrodite. The look of fear on his face as he now had two very angry women glaring at him made him wish to have gone with the four. Off to their mission. He squeaked out. It was a complete opposite of how he was just moments ago. To become fatherless so soon. Aphrodite said from behind the now enraged queen. Hera began to stomp towards the god of lightning and, in turn, said god began to cower. Honey, please, I'm sorry. It had slipped my mind. The mission had distracted me, I had lost my train of thought. I love you. They'll be back soon. I'm sorry. Repent. Do on. Inhale. Exhale. Issei took a slow breath. Oxygen entered, filling his lungs and calming his heart to a slower rate. He then released the carbon dioxide, clearing his mind of any lasting thoughts. He held from taking another. He straightened his back, positioned his feet properly, dug his heels in, and steadied his aim. His target, a wild boar. His weapon of choice, a bow and arrow. 2 fingers held the string, his other hand tightly on the grip with his pointer finger outwards. The arrow was thin with a curved arrowhead. Easy to shoot, hard to get out. Good Issei. Whispered a voice a few feet behind him. Keep your eyes on the target, check for wind changes, and wait for the perfect opportunity. The pawn did as instructed. The wind wasn't very strong, but could still carry his shot if timed poorly. The creature was merely grazing and hadn't the slightest clue of his presence. He looked at different parts of the body, trying to figure out which would kill it easily and swiftly. The eyes. The neck. Perhaps the heart. 2 of those were tough shots with how the boar stood. The same 2 also wouldn't allow the arrow to pierce deep due to its thick fur and thicker skin. And that would give it time to run. It was a no-brainer where to aim. boost. Issei whispered. The arrow's tip glowed a faint green. Chink. The arrow flew with great speed. There wasn't even time to react before it struck between the eyes. It sunk deep into its skull, reaching a little over half the shaft before stopping. Very well done, Issei. Artemis praised. Both of them stood from behind the tall grass. Using your sacred gear to enhance the arrow was a brilliant idea to ensure it would kill upon impact. Thanks. It was because of your teaching. The boy replied. The huntress smirked with a hand on her hip. Of course. I am the best whether Apollo cares to admit it or not. She replied confidently. Issei chuckled before both made their way over to their game. I'm still a bit surprised you chose to go hunting with me. Issei stated as he knelt down. He began to remove the arrow, being sure to not ruin the meat. Do you have to say that every time we go? It's been 3 days. Artemis replied playfully. Are you saying you don't like training with me? Issei shot around and quickly began to deny the accusation. No, I never said that. It's just. He looked off to the side. The devil had indeed been training with the goddess of the hunt since they started their quest. Each and every day they had the same small talk of why she was training him, and every time she would ask him the same thing. He had avoided asking the question that was on his mind in favor of not incurring her wrath. But today she seemed like she wouldn't let the subject drop this time. The look in her eyes told him to come clean. He sighed. I just thought that you couldn't stand being around a man, let alone choose to train one. The pawn prepared for the worst. Would she smite him? Turn him into a stag? Leave him on a small island surrounded by deadly creatures? Sigh. The woman instead released an annoyed breath. It made Issei blink before he looked back at her. The huntress was shaking her head with a tired look on her face. She also looked annoyed and overall upset, but none of it was towards him. I guess I can understand now. She muttered. Raising her head, she made direct eye contact with him. Issei, I'm going to tell you the truth. Most of what you read in those history books aren't true. At least. Not anymore. The boy cocked an eyebrow. What do you mean? Well, I'm not as much of a man-hater as you might think. She answered, folding her arms. Sure, I have had my fair share of bad men, but that doesn't mean I'll lump them all together. What kind of woman judges a gender as a whole just because of a few assholes? Issei's eyes widened at the vulgar word. Of all things, he never expected a god to curse. Especially with such disgust behind it. Wasn't there a code against that, or weren't they above it? Artemis noticed this before taking a calming inhale and exhale. Sorry, it's just that humans play such mortal traits upon us. We're gods, sometimes we tend to be petty or quick to anger, but not everything you hear is true. Issei gained a thoughtful expression. I suppose I can understand. Could you tell me a few? The goddess smirked. Sure. But you're carrying the boar. I was already going to. He replied with a grin. He lifted up the kill and slung it over his shoulders in a fireman carry. So what else isn't true about the gods? Artemis pondered. Then her eyes lit up. Well, my father Zeus isn't the playboy everyone thinks he is. At least, not anymore. I heard of that. Hera had always taken her anger out on the women he cheated with no real indication if Zeus ever got punished. Issei replied. Trust me, she didn't let him off so easily. The huntress shivered at the memory of her father's constant pain-filled wails atop Mount Olympus. It was a month of thunderstorms for Greece. As for some of the women, they weren't all punished as extreme as you think. Some were banished, others turned into peacocks, and a few just had to sacrifice to Hera for forgiveness. Ah, so she is merciful. When she wants to be. Of course, doesn't that go for all of you? Issei asked jokingly. He received a light-hearted laugh. You would be right. A comfortable silence reigned between the two. It was as if they knew each other for quite some time. Like they were old hunting buddies finally meeting up after many years apart. Artemis didn't put it off as coincidence, however. She knew it was Issei who created the atmosphere. Just being who he was, it attracted people and made them feel at ease around him. His protective aura practically wrapped around her, and while he was not at the level of a god, it comforted her knowing he would back her up if the mission came to a fight. So, Issei. Artemis spoke up after a few more minutes of silence. Not to pry into your personal life, but would Kusha be your girlfriend? She asked. This made his eyes widened. And no. What gave that away? What do you mean? You two are practically joined at the hip. The woman replied like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You two have an amazing chemistry together. I even overheard Hera practically screaming to the higher levels of heaven about you two on her way out to find Aphrodite. The pawn's face was bright red. Had he been that obvious with his infatuation towards the woman of his affection? Artemis talked as if he was being blatant about that. So would that mean that Kusha knew as well? If she did she just put up with it for his sake? Would she talk to him and deny his feelings? Oh Mayu, he may have royally fucked up. What is stopping you? It was all he could get out in response. He looked over to see her asking with a genuine look of confusion. "The way you two act. What's stopping you from dating?" she asked again. They had stopped walking by this point and stood in the middle of the forest. All that could be heard was the light breeze tickling the grass beneath their feet and the birds singing happily in the trees. Issei lowered his head. Two women appeared in his head the moment she asked that question. He still had difficulty looking at their faces, the memories coming back full force. He was lucky neither were there with him, as the sheer thought of them made his body feel so heavy. He felt so tired and, most of all, felt like nothing. Just an empty husk that walked and talked. But was controlled and manipulated by the ones he thought he could have a true connection with. What a joke. I've seen those eyes before. Issei focused to see the blue eyes of Artemis. He instinctively tried to move back but was caught by the hands of the huntress. She held him in place by his cheeks as she seemed to stare deeper into his eyes. Artemis. He spoke, not liking the intent focus of the goddess. "Yes, I know these eyes very well." She continued without acknowledging him. He decided to let her do whatever it was she was doing. Sooner it was over the better. Stare. Old Issei would have been a mess of putty in the very beautiful woman's hands, but the Issei now was more concerned for the intense eye contact. She kept saying that she had seen his eyes before, but he had no idea what that meant. The intensity coming from them was also quite intimidating to him as well. It dug deep, as if looking into his soul, searching for an answer as to why. Issei didn't want to dig deeper on this, but Artemis, she wouldn't stop. Could it be that she just enjoyed the fact his eyes were hazel? But it was a pretty common eye color in the human world. Was it the way his eyes looked? He couldn't tell because he really didn't know what his eyes looked like at the moment. Probably wide with confusion and fear. Maybe there was something caught in them. No, that's stupid. Release. She finally let him go when he wasn't expecting it. He shook his head and moved his jaw a bit, stretching it. The woman had incredible strength despite her stature and had kept him immobile the entire time. His cheeks were a bit sore and he'd rather not have his jaw lock up. The sheer physical strength of a goddess was no joke. "My apologies, but I think I have figured out why you haven't made Kusha your lover." Artemis spoke up. The shock of her words made Issei drop the boar. His eyes widened and he looked back at her to see a firm look on her eyes. She knew. Just from a little eye contact. "You hesitate," she revealed, pointing a finger at him. Issei blinked twice. That wasn't the answer he expected. "What? You hesitate to tell her how you feel? You fear her rejection despite the obvious signs you notice. You're unsure if she's trying to play you, ease you down, or you're just plain unsure if it's friendly or more. So you constantly have this paranoia that has been built from a traumatic experience from your past. Because of that you won't make the first move because any step you pushed before ended bad. Would I be correct in assuming this is the case?" The dragon's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound actually came through. How? You. He couldn't create a coherent sentence. His mind had halted as he had been picked apart. All she did was look into his eyes and knew of his exact dilemma. Even without naming anyone, she knew where the problem lied. Was this the power of a god? How? It's quite simple. You two are joined at the hip, but the laughing and joking you do isn't sibling related. Friends have those conversations, but the longing look in your eyes told me there was something more. However, when something that allowed for further affection was presented, you declined abruptly and backed down, leaving you and her in an awkward setting. It is normal for couples first starting, but the fact you, nor her, made no moves to push past the awkwardness and strengthen your newly found infatuation, it would mean you haven't confessed to one another. And now, I have discovered the reason is coming from you due to your traumatic fears. Issei wasn't sure if she took a breath. But she seemed to describe him almost flawlessly. The goddess had been watching them from the start and noticed subtle things that would have flown over his head if the roles were reversed. Any minute detail she had pieced together and made very accurate assumptions on the pawn and queen. It was almost scary, but he could only be in awe of it. While unknown of Kusha and what the goddess said about her was true, he found himself stripped bare and splayed out before her as she nailed his dilemma on the head. "You figured it out so easily," he admitted. "Even I didn't know everything about it. And I am myself." Artemis smirked in response. "You aren't a god without some wisdom. And I'm a huntress, noticing details like this is child's play." Issei was impressed. Even if seen as minor to her, having such a trait was very beneficial when it came to a lot of things as a god. He couldn't help but respect her more due to this fact of strength she possessed. "Don't hesitate." He blinked. "Huh?" He focused back on the huntress. Her head was lowered and she looked to be having thoughts of her own. "Don't hesitate anymore. I know better than anyone that hesitation can spell the end. Sometimes for you. Sometimes for the ones you love." She casted a sideways glance at him. He could see the pain in her eyes, having thought of something similar to the situation. Issei pondered if anything like that was written in the history books. False or not, it could give him something to try and comfort the goddess. She did encourage him, and he couldn't leave a maiden who looked on the verge of tears. And then he quickly remembered. Orion. Oh. He bit his lip. Two faces appeared once more. But what if she's? That is not for you to assume. She said with a slight frown. What if she isn't? And the longer you hesitate, the more you hurt her. This made Issei pause. He never really considered the idea of her actually liking him back. The idea that he actually might be hurting her by hesitating and not being honest. He never truly looked at the glass half full, it would seem. Such thoughts had gotten him killed or traded the last 2 times, so he didn't want to jump the gun again and reap similar results. Rainer had asked him out. She was the one to initiate it. She laughed at his jokes, held his hand, and was actually very touchy in general. She even created a few grope moments, such as brushing her boobs against his arm or even grazing her hand over his package. He would assume that was as frank as a girl could be when she liked a guy. Until she stabbed him and left him to bleed out. Rias had kissed him, she kissed him, after he defeated Razor. It was a hard-fought battle. One he sacrificed a piece of himself just to have a chance at saving her. The tears he saw in her eyes when she caught him. They were no longer of sadness, like her life had been given away. They were of happiness, gaining back the freedom she rightfully deserved. Issei had seen a look in her eyes that he had never seen before. One that led to their kiss where she grabbed his cheeks and pulled him in. No consent, no second thoughts, just a spur of elation. That was just as candid as a girl could be with her emotions, right, wrong. And days later, he was traded away without so much as a goodbye or a best wishes. So he didn't have the best track record when it came to pushing that next step. Both times he was wrong. Both times led to life-altering events. And both times his feelings were casted aside and his heart was shattered. So it wasn't on his immediate radar to try and jump the gun a 3rd time. Because he didn't know what he would do if he was thrown away again. If his feelings were ignored again. Or if he, as a person, was even considered as such again. Although, he didn't have the backing of a goddess before. Especially one considered a man-hater. Nor had he really bonded with anyone like he had with Kusha. There was his bond with Mitsuda and Motohama, but they were just bros, it's a guy thing. He also had Arena, but their bond was different. It lacked something that he and the queen shared. Not to say their bond was any less important, but his and Kusha felt warmer. I still see you're conflicted. Artemis spoke. Issei focused back in to see the goddess crouched in front of him. It took note of that for the boy to realize he was flat on his ass. When he fell, he didn't know, but meeting the gaze of the huntress as she bore into him, it wasn't the best thing to come back to. So, with cheeks flushed at being caught, Issei turned to the side. There's a lot to think about. Not exactly. Artemis retorted. The pawn looked back. You're making things much more difficult than it has to be. But no, it's my turn to talk. He clamped his mouth shut. You're young, you're growing, it's all understandable. You have had a bad past with women, I'm sure, and it's created this paranoia that you just aren't good enough. That is understandable too. But I won't say it's acceptable. Boo. Bwink. An arrow struck between Issei's legs. He recoiled in fear, not even sure of where the arrow had come from. He was sure Artemis hadn't moved and there was no one else within his sensory field. But the look in her eyes dared him to open his mouth again. The best he could do was thank the Mao that the arrow was a few inches short. Now then, as I've said, this pessimism towards yourself is unacceptable. You're the Sairaorg for Zeus's sake. No headache. Guess the king of Olympus was lenient. Close your eyes. Issei looked at her to see she wasn't joking. He sighed but complied. Now, when you think of Kusha, what do you feel? Warmth. He said without hesitation. The brunette was surprised, but his mouth continued on without a need for thought. Compassion, care, safety, peace, sanctuary, among many others. Have you ever felt this way about other love interests before her? Issei didn't have to think very hard. No. It was no more than a crush with Rainer. Falsified affection due to my outrageous lust at the time. And it's a no towards Rias as well. Looking back, I may have felt one way or another. But now I know her feelings were just lies and illusions to hide that she was merely using me. So Rainer and Rias are their names. Artemis mused. Shall I kill them for you? What? No. He blurted back, his earlier emotions dropped for shock. Why? I've taken a liking to you. They hurt you, so I hurt them. It's as simple as that. She replied with a nonchalant shrug. Was she actually being serious? Issei pushed past the fact the goddess admitted to him that she liked him. As a genuine friend, he wasn't an idiot to think anything more. Still, he'd rather not mention the fact she'd be committing a serious crime if she tried to kill the Mao Lucifer's sister. There's no need. He answered, waving his hand side to side to defuse the situation. Artemis looked unconvinced, so he explained. Raynor is already dead, Rias made sure of that. And Rias. I'd rather deal with her myself. A knife to the jugular would. Talk with her. I'll talk with her. Honestly, was killing people always a god's first thought for dealing with bad ones? Artemis folded her arms and looked off to the side. That's boring. A knife would be much more efficient. At killing her? Well yeah, how else are you supposed to show your stance? Issei blinked twice. Artemis released an unladylike groan. Fine, talk to her. But when that doesn't work, don't come crawling back to me. Issei froze for a few more seconds. Eventually he just sighed and shook his head. The pawn lifted the boar onto his shoulders once more and began his walk back to camp. But not without answering the goddess first. Aha. He replied sarcastically. I'll be sure to come to you for your expertise of knives and stabbing. He had walked all of 2 steps before a pair of arms wrapped around his head and pulled him back. Oh, I can't stay mad at you. He heard the older woman coo. He felt 2 soft mounds envelope his face as he was yanked back around and dropped the boar once again as he was squeezed tightly. You have so many options and places to stab depending on what reaction you want. I can show them all. Issei tried to cry out his disposition. The superior goddess's strength made it impossible to get out a single word, and he was left to suffocate in her torturous sign of affection. Artemis misheard his cries and thought them cheers of encouragement. Yes, we'll stab her together. That's right. Together. Kusha sat across from Apollo. A look of strain was on her face as she concentrated on what was within her hands. A black sphere was spinning wildly between her palms, its energy spiking at random places, some striking her causing the devil to wince. You mustn't force it. The energies have to flow naturally or. Before he could warn her, the sphere collapsed in on itself and fizzled into nothing. A few sparks grazed her skin causing her to flail her arms in an attempt to alleviate the stinging sensation. The queen looked at her palms, seeing the red marks from the failure. She sighed out of frustration and lowered her head in defeat. Drenched in sweat, she had been at this new training since Issei and Artemis left to go hunting. That was hours ago. Apollo chuckled softly, garnering the young blonde's attention. Let's take a break for now. You won't be able to succeed when there seems to be a lot on your mind. The queen tensed. How did you know? Apollo chuckled again. Child, when you're my age, you tend to pick up on a lot of these things. Although, it would be hard not to tell. She pouted at his jab, but he gave her a reassuring smile soon after. Would you care to discuss it? Is it the actual training or something more? Kusha glanced over to the last place she saw Issei and Artemis disappear to. Apollo caught where her eyes went and the gears in his head began to turn. Of course, he knew of his sister's reputation amongst those outside of his pantheon, and his thoughts focused on that. She's not how they say she is. He commented. It caught the girl's attention as she looked back to him, confused. Huh? My sister. She's not the man-hater everyone portrays her to be. She, more than likely, just hates me, haha. He tried to get the laugh to spread to her, but it didn't even get a smirk. Soon enough, his own smile disappeared as he continued to study the girl and her conflicted expressions. She sat there, looking down at her feet, a frown marring her face. I'm sorry if that joke was in poor taste. The god apologized. No, it's nothing like that. It's more so. Kusha paused. She bit her bottom lip, conflictions continuing to rage in her mind. Is it Issei? He then asked. Kusha's eyes widened like a kid being caught with their hand in the cookie jar. He almost missed it due to her hanging her head low. You worry for him. Kusha sighed. There was no reason to hide it. The god would probably keep digging if she did. I'm worried for him. I wouldn't worry much. My sister knows these forests like the back of her hand. And she is more than capable of handling whatever beasts dare challenge them. The queen released another sigh. It's not like that. Issei is strong, really strong. At least physically. I fear more for his mental and emotional state. This made the god raise a brow. But Issei seems to carry himself highly. He's quite the man to follow. Yes, he carries himself well in front of others, but that is because it took a moment for the curly-haired male's words to reach her. Her immediate reaction was to blush, knowing exactly what the being meant. Wait, me and Issei aren't that way. Apollo rose a brow. Oh? I would assume by your chemistry with one another. We're just really good teammates. But you wish to be more. The god cut in. His first response was the queen turning a deeper shade of red. His second was light murmurs that fell out of his hearing range. I'm sorry. Would you mind repeating that for me? Kusha bit her bottom lip once more. I said. I wouldn't mind. So why not tell him? Kusha's eyes widened and her mouth fell open for a few seconds. I could never. Why not? You're infatuated with him. Why hold your emotions in and leave yourself in such a state? The blonde's eyes fell once more. They lingered on the pile of woods that sat between them. She clasped her hands together, her thumbs twiddling together, one over the other. Her feet even played together, the tips rubbing over one another, easily displaying the devil's uncomfortable state. It's the reason I worry for Issei's well-being. The reason he's like this, it is the reason why I fear the emotions within me. Apollo's eyebrows furrowed. He leaned forward, placing his forearms on his knees. Please, elaborate. I wish to understand. Issei. The way he joined Sairaorg wasn't on the best of terms. Yes, I heard the stories. That Gremory girl was a fool to trade the Red Dragon Emperor. That's just it. The fact that she did that is what caused such problems for Issei's unstable state. You mean the rumors of a whole new form when he fought the fallen general, Bael? Kusha nodded her head. He looked at her several times during that fight, expecting something from her. During the peace meeting, he held on to my hand because he said it was hard for him being in the same room as her. The moment he made eye contact with her, his grip increased, and it was like a vice. Whenever she spoke, his hand grew sweaty. It's like. You believe he still has some attachment to her? I do. There was no sign of hesitation. It may not be the same as when he was a part of her peerage, but you feel that there are untreated wounds still there. Apollo surmised. Kusha nodded her head once more. The god hummed and even placed a hand to his chin for added effect. Well, from what I've noted, he shows no signs of wounds. When you two are talking, it doesn't seem forced or strained. You talk, laugh, smile, and enjoy one another's company in a way that seems far beyond what's expected as teammates. And even past friendship. It is why I assumed you two were more. The queen had heard his words, but it took a little longer for them to register. I know. She nodded and bit her lip. The way he smiles, the way he laughs, it seems like everything is alright. But time and time again, I see this crestfallen look. This look of fear, hesitation, and even anger. And it makes me worry for him more. Do you feel that any of that is directed at you? No. Kusha denied. She blushed at how quickly she had responded. I mean, I don't think he'd ever blindly direct those feelings towards me. Issei's not that kind of person who pushes his feelings onto others. He just holds up this front, and I feel that, sometimes, he does it to me or Sairaorg so we won't worry. He tries to do it for our sake, but I know how he truly feels. Would you care for the advice of an old god? Kusha turned to him to see Apollo smile softly. He wanted to help her, truly. Not all gods were pompous pricks, like their Roman counterparts. But you didn't hear that from him. The young woman gave him a soft nod. I think you should try entering a relationship with him. What? She said in a hushed tone. It did little to display the genuine shock she was feeling. It could have been seen as calm if it wasn't for her widening eyes. And why would she not be surprised after everything she just told him? Hear me out. He shifted on his seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. The reason Issei is the way that he is because of that Gremory girl, correct? Kusha nodded. And he was first turned to a devil after some fallen angel killed him, after seducing him, correct? This made the blonde's eyes widen to full size. How did you know? The man of his power and of his feats, the origin story wouldn't take much digging to find out. And a man of music, such as I, knows how to find these things easily when you know where to look. He answered with a sly wink. Now, would that information be correct? Kusha nodded slowly. She had to remember she was before a powerful god. Information about Issei couldn't be kept secret. It's just because of who he was. Everyone had to know one form or another of it. That is what he told me. So, and this is a simple assumption, wouldn't another woman be able to solve his current woman troubles? I don't think that. Think about it. Issei had been betrayed once by a woman he found himself infatuated with. She killed him and broke his heart. The Gremory girl swooped in, doted on him, offered him a harem, and he was as happy as can be, correct? Kusha hesitated for several seconds before nodding again. Then what's to stop you from doing such a thing again? Besides the trading and heartbreaking piece, of course. I don't think Issei would. Apollo rose a finger. Child, he is but a young man. One who has had his heart broken twice. He is searching for something, or someone, to mend it. Or to, at least, distract him from such hardships. Albeit, he'll be cautious and have many defensive barriers, but if you stay by him, I assure you he will open up and let you in. How can you be so sure? What if he doesn't see me that way? Trust, I know how men are. I have created love, broken couples up, brought them back together. Tartarus, I'm the reason my sister has staved off men. I know that you would do more than heal him. The god then leaned forward, resting his cheek on his fist. And if he somehow doesn't see you in that light, would you truly hate staying as friends? No. She answered immediately. Her fist tightened as they rested on her thighs. Then you should have no fear. Kusha looked up at God. Friends, teammates, partners, lovers, it shouldn't matter. You seem to care mostly for his happiness. I do. Then focus on that. But don't be afraid to also be a little selfish as well. A being of his caliber won't be able to stay single for long. Kusha looked into the god's eyes. She could see a mischievous twinkle. The slight upward turn on one side of his lips. It was even more pronounced by how it was mushed upward by his own fist digging into his cheek. You're teasing me. She concluded. I merely state facts. He is a dragon and they are known for their power. And with power comes enemies and potential mates. It's up to you where you wish to stand. Near him or with him. Kusha looked down at her hands. They were still clenched into fists. There was still confliction inside of her. Her emotions, her thoughts, and yet it all revolved around Issei. He never stayed out of her mind for very long. He was always there. His smile, his laugh, his sadness, even his tears. And the way he looked after the fight with Kakabeel. She never wanted to see him like that again. She didn't want to be a spectator to the day he may lose his life trying to do everything himself. She had to be there for him before he got himself killed. But who would she be at his side? Was it really okay to be selfish? The queen thought back to the meeting with the Phoenix clan. The way Ravel had looked at him. The blushing, the hazed eyes, the slight squirming, it was obvious the girl was infatuated with him. And she had to remember, there were plenty of others who wanted Issei for their own. Would she simply sit by and watch as he was fought, bought, or even seduced over to whatever whore's bedchamber? She wished not to think such things. Apollo was right. Her hesitation had the possibility of losing him forever. And yet, she still hesitated now. She didn't know how to approach him or how to tell him. And that was if he was even ready for such a talk. Who knows how the boy's heart was and if he was even ready to try and let someone in again. They talked and laughed, yes, but it was always with an air of friendship. At least, that's what she thought. But was there really something more? Was Apollo right to say such things about how she and Issei interacted? As I said, Kusha, it is my advice to strike now. Apollo then stood. After this is over, things may not be the same when you return home. And he walked off. Kusha watched him go before turning back to her hands. She sighed with exhaustion, her mind having a flood of thoughts running through. She knew that the god was right, but she still felt herself holding back, unable to come to a true conclusion for herself. Unable to truly know how Issei would react if he knew. Apollo said such a chance may never come again. And the worst was going back to friends, it would seem. But would she really be okay with that? She then smelled the results of her labor. Being alone allowed her to take in the things around her once more. And it made her nose scrunch up in disgust. First, a wash, then, Issei. Issei was panting lightly. It was obvious he had been working hard by the fresh sheen of sweat covering his upper torso. The boosted gear shone off the rays of the early morning light. The pawn went through his stances once more, lifting his bow. He pulled the string back but without a notched arrow. He closed his eyes, focusing on the weapon in his hand. He took a few calming breaths, following the instructions Artemis had taught him. He pictured an arrow notching itself between his fingers as he continued to slow his rapidly beating heart. Boost. Boost. A flicker of green sparked between his left fingers, the shimmer of an arrow appearing. He dared not open his eyes, trying to keep focus, but he could feel it slowly bring itself to reality. His heart was still pounding, becoming harder to ease as the excitement grew in him. He was close, so very close to a breakthrough. It was literally between fingers. Issei. PSSS. And, just like that, it was gone. Just as it finally began to solidify, the arrow evaporated instantaneously. It forced out another dejected sigh from the already frustrated boy. But it was no fault of the arrows or the boosted gear. There was just too much on his mind as is. Defeating Vali was a huge part of it, as well as Zeus's words about Hades. Somehow the two were connected, and that wasn't a good thing if anyone was working with Vali. Especially if it involved reviving the evil dragons alongside a literal god. Then, there was Artemis's words and Kusha. Issei. He was going crazy. The queen was stuck on his mind. Protecting her, keeping that same warm smile on her face. Issei. Wait, that wasn't in his head. The brunette turned to see the person of his affection standing behind him. He inwardly cursed himself for his screw-up. He didn't even notice her presence having been too caught up in his thoughts. Although, it wasn't all that bad. She looked so beautiful in the morning glow. She looked almost angelic if it wasn't for the clear fact she was a devil. Devilishly gorgeous. Could he say that? Either way, he would have missed such a gift if he spoiled it by sensing her arrival. Oh, hey, been there long? He asked, trying not to be awkward. Or be caught staring. It's such a beautiful day. Really have to appreciate nature sometimes. Explore and see all the beauty it has to offer. If we didn't have such an important mission, of course. Kusha giggled. If the situation was different, I would have been happy too. The duo stood in a moment of awkward silence. It had become a sad normality for them. Who created the atmosphere, neither knew, but they had knowledge of the awkwardness that would ensue between them. A lot of their idle chatter always ended like this, just before a point that couldn't be taken back. It was always moments like this that led to them changing the subject or splitting away from one another. Neither felt they could continue forward, always waiting for the other. A sign, a suggestive glance, or open motion, something that would give them the okay to push for the conversation to be something more. Not like that, though. Issei panicked while shaking his head. We don't have to be like that together. I mean, Ladora, Sairaorg, any of them can also come, haha. And just like that, the moment had begun its decline, like usual. Issei's fears crept up again, and he began to backpedal, fast. No matter how much he wanted it to be more, he still found the walls holding strong and him running behind them once more. The shackles of his past continued to pull him deeper into the abyss. Rias and Raynor were looming over him. A look of cruel satisfaction on one's face and a look of disappointment on the other. Both hands wrapped around his heart, squeezing tight, filling him with fear. Fear of the past repeating itself. Actually, Kusha spoke up. She stepped forward, taking Issei's hands between both of hers. Maybe it can be just the two of us next time. Wait. Why you mean it? He asked in a hushed tone, disbelieving. He was unbelievably tense, his palms sweaty in her hands. But the queen couldn't tell if it was from his nervousness or his training. I mean, you don't have to do it for my sake. It's okay, I get it. Kusha smiled softly. It was a warming smile for both her and him. She wanted to reassure him but also reassure herself. Apollo's words rang in her ear again, and she couldn't help but see it clear on the boy's face now. The hopefulness that hid behind the fear. He really did desire the love of a woman, but was too afraid to make the first move. How could she have been so blind? Yes, Issei, I am sure. I'd love nothing more than to continue spending time with you. That's great. He said in a breath of relief. He also seemed to grow a bit more relaxed as his shoulders sagged. All of this has been too much. For me and for you. I thought about it just because we need a break every now and then. I agree. Especially with how you've been grinding yourself into the ground, mister. She teased, tightening her grip on his hands. Training so early in the morning after training late in the night with Lady Artemis. Talking with Drake and Apollo on different types of abilities. Even back then, after the fight with Kakabiel and Vali, you still went right back to training. You need to stop before you send yourself to an early grave. This made his eyes darken a bit as he turned away from her. I can't. I have to get stronger. You can do that without putting your body and your life on the line so many times. She twisted herself to try and look him in the eyes, but he just turned again. Issei. I can't Kuikai. Not when so many strong enemies like Vali and Kakabiel can come after me. Or you. He bit his bottom lip. I was weak against Kakabiel and almost died. And then Vali, I got lucky because he underestimated me. But I don't want to go against someone who's super strong and rely on others again. I have to get stronger, strong enough to defend myself. Strong enough to protect you. Issei, I'm not some damsel in distress. Remember, I trained you. Even still, I want to be strong enough to be there for you. I don't want to let you, or anyone else, down ever again. It's something I have to do. I'd never live it down if you got hurt. Or worse. You can't keep placing this weight on just yourself. There was hurt in her voice, and he dared to spare a glance back at her. We told you, we, every last one of us, are a team in this. You can't keep putting all this stress on yourself and leaving us out. Leaving me out. Issei bit down on his lip, hard. Kuikai. No Issei, you have to promise me. Promise me you won't leave me out. He hesitated. He could feel her searching gaze. It burned into the side of his head. Her hands were now holding him in desperation. He could feel the slight trembles and had to turn away again as she tried to find his gaze. I can't. Why? She sounded hurt. More than any physical pain could give her. Why wouldn't you let me in? Because I'm scared. He said, much to both teens' surprise. Both of their eyes widened and Issei turned back to see Kusha's equally off-guard expression. Why are you afraid? She asked, recovering much faster than the brunette. I've always told you that you could come to me about anything. So why are you afraid now? She had to push. This was her chance. And she would be selfish and take it. I can't say. He muttered out pathetically. He tried to pull his hands away, but they were in the queen's tight grip. He shook his head, his heart beating rapidly. He could see their faces again. He could hear their voices, their laughter, the same laughter at his expense. I can't. I just can't. I don't want to. I can't. I can't, okay. Kusha could see the panic in his eyes. The way he tried to yank his hands away from her and run away. But she couldn't allow it. These were the walls Apollo spoke of. She had to break them down, and him running away was going to make things all the more harder. She had to push forward. She had to swallow her fears of what she thought in favor of saving Issei from his own fears that would swallow him whole. You can tell me, Issei. She held him firmly, moving herself closer. You fought to protect me. Against Bael, you fought the general, instead of me. I was more experienced and could have held him off, but you did. I could have helped you, but you didn't want that because you wanted to protect me. You even took on Volley by yourself, all to protect me. So, tell me, why? Why do you continue to fight for me when you know I can fight for myself? Issei stopped his poor escape attempts. He looked back at her to see how close she had actually gotten. Her eyes were hard and filled with a resolve to find out. And, for that moment, the voices were silent. The faces were gone. Those eyes were no longer piercing at the back of his mind. All he could see was her. The beautiful woman he had somehow fallen for. She pulled him closer to the point their noses touched. Why, Issei? Because I love you. What did you say? I said nothing. You're lying. Issei slumped. Yeah. I am. Issei. It's been hard, Kusha. The queen tensed a little. He never used her actual name unless he was absolutely serious. I don't know when it started or why it became so potent, but I love you. Kusha released her grip on him, Issei backing himself up against a tree, slamming into the trunk. He didn't even meet her eyes, choosing to stare at the ground instead. Your smile, that slight twinkle in your eyes when you get excited, your laugh, they all became things I looked forward to seeing. As he spoke, Issei started sliding down the base of the trunk. With each passing day, I felt this nagging feeling to want to be beside you, just to feel a little more alive again. I smiled more, I laughed more, I felt myself grow a little more. All by just being by you. Once he settled on the ground, Kusha moved forward. He rose a hand when she got halfway. She stopped immediately, seeing the pleading look in his eyes. He was opening to her, and she'd rather not risk him clamping up again because she smothered him. So, she took a step back and waited patiently as he tried to collect his next set of words. Issei stared at the grass just a bit longer before his eyes slowly raised to meet hers. How much do you know of how I came to join you guys? He asked softly. His eyes looked so tired all of a sudden. It was like the flip of a switch between talking about her to talking about this. His eyes looked so heavy and the invisible weight on his shoulders was actually noticeable. Sairaorg Sama never told us much. If we ever asked, he told us it was your story to tell, not his. Best any of us know is that Rias traded you because she thought you were too weak. Issei chuckled darkly. Leave it to Aniki. But no, that isn't all. Issei rolled his head over to look throughout the clearing. The trees dancing with the wind and the grass rolling like waves on an endless horizon. It made the scene all the more like an edgy anime. How about the beginning? Kusha, I was killed when I was human. The blonde's eyes widened. By a woman I thought I loved. She came to me, confessed to me, asked me out even. A pretty girl came to me. I was but a loser at the time, so I felt like I was on cloud 9. She was cute, kind, had a pair of breasts that made me want to scream for joy. My type of woman. I thought at the time. Why shouldn't I have been the happiest man on earth? It was a dream come true, the start to my crazed and unattainable dream. Kusha bit her lip listening to the tale. The way Issei looked in the pain in his voice, it made her want to comfort him. But she knew he had to tough through this. That he needed to talk about it, all of it. To let it out into the open. And once it was all out, she would comfort him with sweet nothings and loving assurance. Of course, when we went on our first date, she rewarded me with a light spear through the heart. I thought the date went pretty well, she obviously didn't. He joked darkly, coldly laughing at his own murder. It broke Kusha's heart hearing such pain seeped into something meant to heal it. So, I lay there dying, hearing that my sacred gear is dangerous, that I should blame you-know-who, and that the date was actually boring and bland. Hearing that on your deathbed doesn't exactly give you the best of confidence, you know. Then, she saw his eyes grow increasingly dark. As if all the light reflecting in it had vanished. His body relaxed, almost too much by how he seemed to slump further to the floor. It was actually scary to see him carry such a lifeless look, but the slow rise and fall of his chest showed he was still alive. She could only guess what happened next. Then. She came. My supposed savior, my supposed goddess, the one who gave me a second chance. I wished to see her once more, don't ask me why, and she brought me back to life. I was thrilled, excited, to live again and get the joy to see her naked, cause I'm a perv like that. But truly, now that I think about it, I was most thankful that someone saw something in me to give me that second chance. Issei's head rocked side to side slowly, his eyes hazed over. As time passed, I thought I was becoming one of them. A club member, a fellow devil, a friend, family. Rias helped me save Asia and helped me with Rainer, by murder, because why not? I truly thought I was a part of them now. Bam. 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 Kusha's eyes widened as Issei started to bang his head against the trunk. Again. And again. And again. Tears were starting to stream down his face as he continued to harm himself. His fists clenched at his head, thick grips of hair in them, as he continued to do so, his legs tucked into his chest. I was stupid. Stupid, 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 stupid. Kusha had enough and rushed to him. She slid to her knees and grabbed the boy's head, pulling it into her chest. He flailed and tried to break free, but she held him tight. Let go. I'm too weak. I'll always be weak. I can't get over her. I wasn't strong enough to help her. I couldn't even save her without the help of holy materials and sacrificing my arm. I'm a failure, I'm an idiot. I didn't belong with them. I was never one of them. Issei continued to cry his pain out. Kusha never moved, keeping a firm grip on his head, feeling the tears stain her shirt. She could feel his hands grab a hold of her top as he wailed, blaming himself and his shortcomings. And she listened as he continued, straining his voice. But, eventually, they would become softer and softer. Once he was silent, she released her hold and pulled his head back. Their eyes met once more, his red and puffy to hers filled with the love and care she knew he needed. Issei, you're not a failure. You're not an idiot. You're the man I fell in love with. She whispered softly. But it did the trick as his eyes widened and his breath hitched in his throat. You trained hard every day with us. You caught that stray devil and made friends with a powerful exorcist. You held off Kakabeel and saved the city. You defeated Vali on your own and protected me. You had a hand in forging an alliance between the three factions. You stand here now, helping the Greek pantheon. You're the strongest, bravest, kindest man I have ever met, besides Sairaorg of course, and I can't help but find myself loving you more each and every day. Issei sat there, stunned into silence. His mouth had already gone slack, and his hands felt numb as they hung limp at his sides. His eyes searched and searched and searched, looking for any signs of deception. The pain in the back of his head assured that he wasn't dreaming, but he still wanted to pinch himself, just to be sure. If only his arms could work right now. Really? He asked in a hushed whisper. The tears were about to start again. What kind of man was he, crying so much? Kusha gave him the warmest, most affectionate smile she had ever shown him. One he had seen many times between his parents. One Kusha had never experienced before. Filled with the love she had for the young man sitting in front of her. Yes, you doofus, I love you. Issei blinked a couple of times, still expecting to break out of the illusion someone placed him in. But nothing ever changed and Kusha's smile never lessened. She only lowered her head, resting her forehead against his, never breaking eye contact with him. She even hummed happily and giggled, enjoying the look of disbelief on his face. I said it. She cheered in her mind. I said it, I said it, I said it. Even Apollo and Artemis, who were a distance away, were ecstatic. They did their own happy dances from behind the tree they had chosen as their hiding spot. High fives, weird finger wriggling, even some hip bumps. It wasn't hard to say that they had been there the entire time and had watched the entire exchange. From top to bottom. Artemis was even more furious at Rias, and Apollo himself wanted a word with her. But, after the confession from Kusha, they decided to let the two have their moment. It was a healing moment for the boy and a big step for both of them. They needed to be supportive and happy for the devils, not bitter to something out of their reach. At least at the moment. She said it. He said it. That didn't stop them from their happy dance part 2 for the two devils. Returning back to Issei, he could feel life return to his arms. Realizing he was indeed alive and awake, he gave them a test. Flexing his fingers, he slowly began to move his arms, shaking for just a moment. Kusha had a loose hug around his neck and he felt it almost instinctual to wrap his arms around the small of her back. The spur of confidence was out of nowhere, but it was best he took the moment before he lost it and panicked again. Grip. Kusha was surprised by the sudden action, but made no efforts to remove herself. She could feel the warmth radiating off of him and the look in his eyes. There was that warm feeling again. Issei lifted himself up a little higher against the tree, adjusting himself to where the queen now straddled his lap. Kusha's eyes lidded and her smile widened ever so slightly. She licked her lips, the fresh saliva causing them to glisten off the rays that broke through the tree's foliage. They closed the distance between one another. It was soft, enough so to where it barely registered that their lips touched. And as they parted, the two opened their eyes to see heavy blushes on the others' faces. Then they smiled. I love you. Zoxox, so where to now? We're meeting an ally. If anyone knows of their base of operations, it would be her. Does she have a network of sorts? Something like that. Apollo and Artemis led the way as the group continued their trek. It had been a quiet walk, but one not unwelcomed. Everyone had their own thoughts, some nicer than others, all surrounded around a certain two. Issei still couldn't believe he was living in reality. Kusha had just confessed that she liked him. His feelings felt reciprocated this time, and that fear of wanting more had been quelled by her acceptance. It was as if the stars aligned just for him. Now all he had to do was wait for the moon to hit the earth. However, it was hard to forget Rias. The woman who saved him and kinda led him on. Were there still feelings for her? Of course. Technically, she didn't have to save him, but did. Why, he still wondered. Whatever she saw, he was sure he would crush it. After all, her words still held weight over him, and he had a lot to live up to if he was to shove it back in her face. To prove her wrong. For now, Kusha had taken priority over that. She accepted him as his current self. All his faults, peeves, and everything else. Even being understanding to know of his ties to his former king that were really hard to let go. He couldn't ask for someone better. Kusha had made a promise with him. A promise that as long as he needed her, she would be there for him. Until he fully healed, she would be his medic. As long as he wanted to be loved, she would give it to him. That as long as he desired her, she would stand by his side. And he'd be damned if he didn't hold the same towards her. Artemis, she found herself imagining how many ways she could torture the Gremorys girl. The huntress had taken a liking to the dragon boy and his new girlfriend. At first, she was skeptical, but now they seemed like an extended family in their short time together. A little brother and sister to look out for. And she knew Apollo felt the same way. They were twins after all. Albeit, the younger twin's thoughts weren't as violent as his sister's. While his sister was known for her bronze and quick actions to beat and maim, he was the brains, dealing more psychological warfare if it came down to it. And he definitely held an ire towards the one who had dared to use Issei and then toss him away when he failed to fill her impossible quota. Very similar to how Hera had once used him and Artemis for selfish gains or as some form of punishment for their father's unfaithfulness. And it struck a nerve in his older brother body that created a sort of twitch between his fingers. Oh, it seemed he found himself liking the sound of being an older brother. Especially to the fine young man that was Issei Haidu. Your senses are slipping, young ones. A new voice noted through the silence. This brought the four back to reality and put the two devils on guard. Both who were held back by the twins. Easy, it's just Medusa. Apollo informed. True to his words, a woman stepped into the opening from behind a tree. She was as one would expect of the former beauty who rivaled the goddess Athena in the eyes of the Athenians. Even now, she held a beauty befitting a rarity such as her. Slim features that rippled with muscles, bronze breastplate that covered. Well, her breasts, albeit not much, bracers on both her wrists, and… Wait, she didn't have a lower snake half. She was instead wearing a bronze-plated skirt with two leather belts that crisscrossed over her right hip. This made Issei arch a brow, something the woman noticed. And, before his eyes, he saw scales form and her legs fuse together into a long serpentine tail, a rattler forming at the end that she shook with a hiss of giggles. Surprised? She asked, a playful grin on her face. It was also slender with high cheekbones and golden eyes that practically glowed. And, surrounding her face, a full head of snakes. All alive. All moving. All with their own separate being but all having their eyes trained on him. Still getting used to the whole meeting legendary beings thing. He replied honestly. Then, as a surprise to everyone, he reached forward and held his hands out to the head of snakes. Even Medusa was taken off by the gesture. Some of her snakes had the same feeling and backed off just a bit, hissing defensively. But there was one, braver than the others, who didn't move and stared down the appendage. Then, after a short stare down, it settled down into his palm, almost nuzzling in. And, with that, the others followed. You're all so cute, yes you are, yes you are. You adorable little boop noodles, he. Issei smiled as the snakes took an extreme liking to him, drawing themselves closer to him. Knock it off, you guys, you'll make mama angry acting without permission. The brunette recalled his hand with his little tease, grinning as he stepped back. He then turned to Medusa who was still trying to recover from her initial surprise at his aggressiveness towards her. He noticed this, along with the shock of his team, and scratched his cheek with a light chuckle. Sorry, I've always liked snakes. I never got to have one, but seeing them up close, I couldn't resist. Medusa was actually the first to recover, her cheeks garnering a dust of pink. Well, I must say, that is a surprise to hear. Most fear me upon their first meeting, assuming I'll turn them to stone. Issei shook his head. If that was the case, I would have already been turned to stone. And I'm sure Artemis-sama and Apollo-sama would have informed us before meeting you. This made the snake woman pause for only a second or two before she giggled once more. Smart deduction. You're an interesting one. He's the boy, Issei Haidu, correct? She chuckled towards him before aiming the question at Artemis. Yes, he is. Her fellow woman confirmed. Even the huntress found herself chuckling at the sudden openness from her pupil. He had been quite reserved since their initial meeting, only sharing the bare minimum, even after her prying for more. She'd take it as a win. No need to ask questions and possibly lose the smile he currently held. Kusha already cracked a bit of that shell. Good. Medusa slithered forward, her eyes staring deep into Issei's. The boy seemed a bit uncomfortable by the sudden proximity with the being who was said to turn anyone to stone with her gaze alone. But he held his ground, feeling a few of the snakes lick at his face. Do you really like my snakes? It's obvious they like you. Of course I do. They are all so adorable and add to your beauty. Issei spoke, his mind wandering as he played with a few of the reptiles. In doing so, he failed to notice the embarrassed look on Medusa's face. When he turned back, he could see a furious blush on her face. Hey, are you okay? He asked, truly not knowing what he had said. Why yes. It's been some time since someone has complimented my beauty. Ever since the transformation. She admitted, looking away bashfully. Kusha, who watched the exchange, felt an elbow nudge her. She turned to see Apollo next to her, a small grin playing at his lips. Be careful, dear. Seems Issei is a natural Casanova. Medusa might take him for her own if you don't stake your claim. He teased. He was swiftly met with a smack on the back of his head, courtesy of one twin sister. Stop scaring the girl. They just confessed to each other this morning. This caught the queen's attention. Wait, you two were watching. The twins quickly averted their eyes, looking everywhere but at Kusha. The answer was obvious. Her eyes narrowed dangerously before she turned to Issei, who was still busy talking with Medusa. There was no way he was purposefully flirting with the snake woman. He was naturally oblivious to things like this and just said things that made people like him. Not out of a necessity to be liked, but because he genuinely felt that way about a person. He was a kindred soul, and that was one of the many reasons she had fallen for the dunce. Oh, I am curious though, Medusa-sama. Please, just call me Medusa. I'm not one for formalities anymore. Alright, Medusa. I was curious as to why I didn't just turn to stone or why you were able to shapeshift from the snake tail to legs. Issei said as he gestured to both. Medusa giggled again but hid it behind a dainty hand this time. My, asking such from a woman. She teased. It had the optimal effect of making Issei's face light up red. He quickly began to apologize, explaining his ignorance to such a sensitive subject which, in turn, made the woman burst out laughing. It had been some time since she had been able to enjoy such a conversation. Nor had she been able to tease with someone who actually found her beautiful. It felt nice. Relax, I'm only joking. She replied, silencing the brunette into an embarrassed mess. I'm going to go ahead and assume you know of the story of how I became like this. Issei nodded. Yes, you were supposedly cursed. Nope, she confirmed. She put a hand to her hip, the other pointing to the air with one finger raised. Actually, this was a gift from Athena. This surprised both Issei and Kusha. The latter was the one who spoke their thoughts first. But I thought you were cursed after Poseidon. You know. After he raped me. Yes. Kusha said softly. Medusa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. They really need to change those history books. Don't I know it, sister? Artemis grumbled from the side. Apollo chuckled awkwardly. Seemed he was the only one with an accurate record of his past deeds. Ignoring that. Yes, Athena was upset after I was raped by the prick of the sea in her own temple. But it wasn't at me, no, that would be stupid. She was mad at that asshole who dared act like he did nothing wrong. Even now Her fist shook with rage, but she took another deep breath, calming herself once more. Moving on. Athena turned me into the infamous snake woman as a way to protect myself. No man, or woman, would ever touch me inappropriately again if the fear of being turned to stone sat at the back of their mind. Not even a god would dare come for me again. But I thought Athena did it as a way to spite you. Didn't you beat her in a beauty contest or something? Issei asked. It wasn't a competition. No one questioned the beauty of a goddess, not even I. I was very beautiful, yes, but I was also a maiden of Athena and would respond as such. So, when she graced me with her presence, I fell to my hands and knees. My goddess then lowered herself to one knee and lifted me back to my feet, telling me of how I didn't need to do such a thing. The people took notice and, well, history seemed to have become very skewed since then. So, Athena did all that to protect you? She didn't know of Poseidon's plans until it was too late. As an apology for her carelessness to her most devoted follower, I was made immortal and gifted with the ability to properly protect myself from both man and god. That's amazing. Issei said in awe. Kusha couldn't help but agree. She wondered what else the history books had lied about. Were the Greeks the only ones or were all the pantheons not like the books portrayed them as? However, Medusa spoke up, bringing the teen's attention back. Her eyes were back on Issei, glowing ominously. You were the first one to call me beautiful since my change. Did you mean what you said? Issei blinked twice, confused by the question. Of course. Why would I lie? Medusa closed her eyes again. She mulled on his words, her snakes also looking to be in deep thought as they wriggled around. Issei found himself in awe at the feat. Alright, I've decided. Medusa suddenly exclaimed, making the brunette jump. She giggled again before turning to face the twins. You two remember the deal we talked of for my assistance? Yes, but we were unable to come to an agreement. You said you would have thought of something before we met again. Yes, well, I believe I have decided. Granted, I just recently altered it. If it is within our power. Medusa's smirk widened. Well, you see, it's not within your power. She said cryptically. This confused the party even as she turned to face Issei. It's your decision. And mine. He squeaked. Yes, I've decided. She confirmed with a nod of her head. If you'll have me, I'd like to be your familiar, Issei. Issei's eyes widened and his jaw went slack. Kusha also had wide eyes, but her jaw looked ready to hit the floor. Artemis couldn't help but fathom him as Apollo chuckled with a smug smirk. Yeah. So. Arachne. Oh, her story is actually true. Wait, seriously? Oh yes, she is quite a bitch. She still sings of how she is better than Athena, but no one much listens or cares. Her weaving skills are extraordinary, but her attitude just undermines that. Exactly. Shame. Most of her children are actually pretty peaceful, just sitting in their webs. I know. They just sit there and hunt, helping rid us of pesky bugs, but have such a mother. Issei shrugged while lightly chuckling. I dunno, spiders still make me a bit tense. Even the smaller ones. Might be the eyes. Medusa smirked. You sure it's not the fangs? Some spiders have longer fangs than snakes when compared to body ratio. Yeah, but both do it as a defense when something bigger is pestering them or hurting them. I, at least, understand that much. Spiders just. The eyes and 8 legs. Yes. Which is super weird because I'm cool with scorpions. Issei exclaimed, throwing his hands out in exasperation. Medusa hissed out a laugh. Is that so? They have claws and a stinger. Serket would be happy to hear that, however. Serket? The Egyptian goddess. You know her? Issei asked with a slight tilt of his head. Of course, pantheon legends such as myself and the gods know and talk to others of the different pantheons. I couldn't tell. None of you seem to display such relations between one another. This made the serpent frown. Well, you would blame that of the higher gods and goddesses. Factions are so worried of joining forces due to the possible backlash from other factions. Your factions just happen to be some of the strongest that no one would dare challenge all 3 of you. Issei knitted his brows. Here it was again, the talk of power and control. They were hand in hand everywhere. Power ran the world and was stopping peace from being achieved. People were too scared to make peace because there was the possibility of it creating a war. Why? Would you say you have a great relationship with Serket? He asked. The shift in his tone made the woman turn back. She could see a looming fire in his eyes, one that reminded her much of a hearth. A comforting flame. Her cheeks weren't turning red. They weren't. She is one of my closest friends. She did not just stutter. Nope. What of you, Artemis Ama? Issei didn't miss a step as he turned back to his teacher with the same look. Artemis blushed and turned away, scratching a lone cheek. I mean, Rama and I are always having our archery competitions. Which usually ends in a coffee date. Apollo chimed in. Artemis shoved him, her blush deepening. And you, Apollo? Issei turned it on the god who, in turn, developed a blush of his own. Your blush is telling of it being a possible significant other. Well. Do tell, brother. This will be the first I am hearing of it. Artemis said with an eerie calm in her tone. Apollo hadn't told her of his rendezvous with this person. But he couldn't lie to Issei. Not with that look in his eyes. I'm sorry, mind repeating that? Issei asked. It's SK. One more time. So we can all hear. Apollo's blush was darker than Artemis's had been. It's Kati, okay. God of music, a blushing and mumbling mess. All over dating the goddess of winter from the Norse mythology. Kinda fitting, don't you think, Artemis? My brother does represent light and the sun as well. I would believe so. The huntress joined in with a teasing tone and smirk of her own. Apollo fell to his hands and knees with his head hanging low. I surrender. With a victorious grin, Issei held out a fist to which Artemis met with her own. Even Kusha could be seen trying to stifle her own laughter behind a closed fist. A sight that made Issei's heart rate increase the longer he watched the bright smile on her face. When the queen noticed him staring, she averted her gaze, and her own cheeks turned a bright shade of red. And there is also the relationship of the dragon of domination and the devil. Medusa noted with a teasing smirk of her own. Issei could only blush and turn away from Kusha. It was still embarrassing. They had admitted their feelings just that morning, and he still was reflecting on that. She was in love with him. Her in love with him. It still felt like a dream. But that smile, that laugh, the way she blushed. He couldn't be any happier. Grip. Issei hadn't realized how close she had gotten to him. Nor that their hands were intertwined. They even had their fingers laced together. That was some advanced relationship play. And, judging by the heavy blush and surprise on her face, somehow the pawn was able to figure out that it was he who had made such advances towards his better half. So, what are you getting at, Issei? Medusa asked, arms folded. She wasn't jealous. Not at all. It was too early for her to desire such from her would-be master. It was only a matter of time before he accepted her offer. He had called her beautiful, after all. Then, she would expect him to dote on her whenever she desired, as a master should. Ah, right. Issei replied, snapping back to reality. It was hard to focus when he looked into Kusha's eyes. They were always so enchanting, and that smile. Phew, he was a lucky man. Well, my point is, why should you be afraid to talk and be with those just because they're of another pantheon? Love is love, friendship is friendship, peace is peace. And no one should be afraid to take that step. There isn't much we can do, Ice. The head gods wouldn't do such a thing, not with the looming threat of a war. That's the thing. Why would anyone start a war with two pantheons? They would have to make alliances of their own, wouldn't they? Artemis paused. I mean. And if they made the alliances, wouldn't that defeat their purpose for starting the war? You do have a point. Peace shouldn't be something to fear. The slim chance of someone calling for war against you shouldn't stop you from trying to bridge the gap between all of you. There will always be people against peace. Always has been, always will be. And it's always that type of scum that tries to talk louder than everyone else. But I can guarantee you this, those people do not make up the majority. You have to take that first step, or else no one will. Issei opened his eyes and felt his fist slacken back at his side. He had stepped forward several feet, separating himself from the group. His heart was beating faster than before, and he even had a light sweat going. Had he worked himself up from his, what could he call it? A speech? A rant? Issei. Artemis spoke up. Oh boy, was he about to get lectured in godly politics. I think you're in the wrong profession. Huh. The goddess chuckled. Truly. With such passion for peace, and if you punched less, I'd honestly believe you were a prophet or pacifist. This had caught the boy off guard. For him to have been labeled a pervert earlier this year to now being called something as high as a prophet. You do mean what you say, right? Of course I do. Then why not become that? Issei casted his eyes to the side. A prophet? Yeah, I think I've made too many mistakes to carry such a title. Nonsense. Apollo spoke up next. This made the dragon meet his gaze next. Humans have made many mistakes in their lifetimes. You think the prophets in your history books were saints from birth? I mean. They weren't, Issei. The god answered. All prophets across all religions were not perfect. If even the very gods they worshipped and preached of are not so perfect, then how can they? This made Issei tilt his head to the side. The point is, it's not about the mistakes you have made in the past or will possibly make in the future. Hell, it's not even about being a prophet, per se. The point is, why not be the bridge between pantheons? Why not be the voice for us and all the religions? Me? He squeaked out, eyes wide. Artemis and Apollo nodded simultaneously. But I'm just the Red Dragon Emperor. One who has the power to go against the treaty of the three great factions should you desire. But it was you that stopped the hacker Yuiku and helped finalize the treaty. Why not do the same for all of us? Too many paranoid gods would fear taking that first step, but you could be the person we need, who can help all of us. Issei's eyes were wide. He looked at the three legendary Greek figures. They looked hopeful, as if they could finally open up about their relationships between the other pantheons. As if there was a chance to find some form of peace. It was then that Issei realized that the pantheons had the same form of ceasefire as the three factions had. Those same ideas of a war starting if one pantheon tried to ally itself with another. But why? So, you have all arrived. Slither. Pant. Issei jumped, his heart hammering against his chest. The sound of heaving breathing over his shoulder. The smell of wet fur. And that voice, it was of a little girl, but with an eerie, sadistic tone. That was when he felt something long and slimy rake up his arm. Issei went as stiff as a board, and the giggling behind him didn't help to alleviate the possibility of him pissing his pants. Scylla, I'll ask you not to mess with my master. Medusa stated with folded arms. Issei was now full on panicking, in his mind of course. Scylla, as in the sea monster, Scylla. The one who, with her sister, controlled a narrow strait that not even Poseidon would pass through. The Scylla who controlled weird dog head tentacles and was said to give the warning sound of a laughing child before attacking ships. That Scylla. Oh. So you found a man to take as your own? She teased with a laugh. I have. And you must remember the favor I have asked of you. Medusa said, narrowing her eyes. Even her snakes glared at the monster behind Issei, their eyes starting to glow an eerie gold. And why wouldn't they? The dragon man was nice to them and gave them snuggles. They didn't want to lose him. The dog head that was over Issei's shoulder retreated. The giggling didn't stop, however, but the boy finally calmed and turned to face the new arrival. It was a small girl, roughly the same size as Kaneko. Long sunset orange hair, blood-red eyes, pale skin, and a lone, small fang protruding through her lips. And, around her, 4 long tentacles, each with its own dog head at the end of it. They had a mix between matted black fur and spiky green scales. All with matching glowing red eyes, just like their master. Center. Something like that, I guess. The connection was almost like Medusa and her snakes, if he had to take a guess. You're staring awfully hard. Scylla cackled. Meeting mythological legends isn't a specialty of mine. I see, she replied. So, you know of me? And your sister? Leads me to wonder why you're here. Scylla's grin stretched wide, revealing the sharp teeth that decorated her mouth. They glistened white and with a dangerous sharpness that reminded Issei of a shark. Don't fret, child. Him. Medusa called on me to assist you on your quest, Keha. She cackled. I've been dying for some entertainment and I owe her a favor. And, I've always wanted to devour a dragon, Issei took an instinctual step back. The glint in her eyes and the way she licked her lips did not seem comforting in any way. Medusa was close behind him, draping her arms over his shoulders. It was then he noticed she was in her snake form, allowing her to stand much taller than himself. Scylla. She hissed dangerously. The Redeed laughed in reply. Not your little dragon, dearie. No need to fear, Issei looked over his shoulder towards Kusha. Apollo had whispered something in her ear, receiving a slap on the back of his head courtesy of Artemis, and Kusha pouting at him with folded arms. How was this his fault? He hadn't been leering or perving. Medusa had her arms around him. Scylla was being a sadistic taunt just like in her lore. What was he supposed to do? Why was she mad at him? And how could he feel the soft mounds of flesh, despite the hard armor, pressing into him? Now, Scylla, you remember our discussion? Medusa urged, trying to change the conversation. The location of this ritual, yes. No idea. The group face vaulted. Medusa was the first to recover, slamming her hands on the ground as she lifted herself up. What do you mean you don't know? I searched far and wide. Nothing. No signs, no abnormal lapses of energy. Ajax and Achilles couldn't even find sense. Whatever they're doing, they have kept it quiet. It's probably because of Hades. Apollo informed. This made Scylla perk up. So that's why I smelled the dead, not of my doing. So there's the chance to challenge a god, Keha. Don't get ahead of yourself, Scylla. Hades is one of the strongest beings in existence. So is Poseidon. And I sent him running. Scylla bragged, baring her sharp teeth. Her dogs also did in a snarling grin. 1, you had your sister. And 2, you ambushed him. Medusa added. Not that I am unappreciative, but you know Hades is the strongest of the brothers. His power surpasses that of any Greek god. Well, I'm not a god, am I? No, you are but a monster who feeds on humans dumb enough to pass through your strait. Scylla pouted. Pooh, you're no fun. So what do we do if we can't find them? Issei asked, helping Kusha to her feet. We have to. Apollo replied. No one said it, but they all thought the one word on all of their minds. How? What about following the stench? Issei offered. Excuse me? Scylla, you said that the stench of death isn't yours, right? Indeed. It is a putrid stench not of my doing. Powerful enough to be of the only god who specializes in the dead. Then why not track it to the source? Follow that stench. Issei tried explaining. I mean, if it's something new, he's obviously using it as a cover. What better reason than to mask Chaos Brigade's attempt to revive Layden? The 4 mythological beings blinked before sharing a glance. He continues to amaze me. Artemis spoke first. A fine leader in the making. Apollo continued. Truly a man to follow. Medusa followed. Keha, I might want to devour him now. Scylla chided. Medusa's pupils sharpened. Scylla. Doon. Rumble. The ground shook violently. The group stumbled, but Scylla was quick to send the 4 dogs to catch them before they lost their footing. It wasn't a moment later that a fresh wave of death washed over them. It was putrid and pungent, stinging both their nostrils and eyes. Tears formed at the corner of Issei's eyes. His stomach could no longer contain its contents, and he released them behind the tree he stumbled his way to. Kusha wasn't far behind as she too had streams down her cheeks and her breakfast in a pile on the side of the path. Ugh, seems we are late. Scylla muttered, fanning her hand through the air. Her usual Cheshire grin was gone too, a disgusted frown taking its place. Zoe already knows of its source. Let us go before this dragon ruins any more of my day. We can't. We have to retreat. Apollo stated. Layden is awoken. We must go now. Artemis said, worry and panic now filling her. No, sister, we must report back to father. Apollo argued. We can't. It will be too late before we get back. It will be some time before he regains his full power. We must go now or risk people dying. Artemis urged. But you heard what father said. Apollo replied. And if we do nothing, Cow's brigade will endanger more people. Issei informed, stepping between the twins. Issei, you can't be serious. Facing an evil dragon in Hades. It's suicide. Apollo tried. It took us too long to get here from our searching. If we wait too long, they'll be gone before Zeus or anyone can do anything. If we're to stop Ladon, we need to go now. Besides, Hades may have created the cover for the ritual, but he isn't here. How can you be sure, Issei? Kusha asked. Issei blinked. His pupils sharpened, the hazel now glowed like gold, and his snarl revealed sharpened fangs. Because just like God of the Bible, Yahweh, Hades despises dragons. The blanket of light fell over the group. When Issei opened his eyes, he found himself inside a colosseum. It was filled with rocks, craters, crumbled pillars, and skeletons. A lot of skeletons. There were many skeletons. Some had missing bones, shattered bones, fractures, and pieces missing. No person having been left whole. The only similarity between these bodies was that they were all different warriors of the past, ranging from across the globe, across different timelines. They were Greeks, Persians, Vikings, and Spartans. African soldiers of the early 1800s and even those of the Ottoman Empire. Issei could see soldiers of the Alliance, those of the Iron Cross, with and without the infamous swastika, and many more. It was a graveyard of soldiers and warriors throughout history. All in one place. And, in the very center of the grounds, a massive tree. The bark had been stripped, some of the roots looking ripped from the ground, and the head bare with just a few dead leaves. Issei felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Artemis. She had a dangerous look on her face. They constantly scanned the area, looking for the slightest movements. Scylla and Medusa weren't too far behind. The former had her hound sniffing around, while Medusa's snakes kept their eyes on the swivel. There was a golden hue around her own as she held her bow in a tight grip. Apollo stayed by Kusha, keeping her a hair's distance away from him. Just enough to protect her if they were attacked. Boom. Issei felt the malice and felt his body move on its own as he dove forward. The ground behind him exploded from an attack. Dust had been kicked up and a pillar was turned into fragments. The brunette rolled back to his feet and summoned the boosted gear. So you aren't fleeing. Issei looked up towards the rafters of the Colosseum. There, he saw 5 individuals. One which he was very acquainted with and could feel the anger boiling at the sight of him. So, you are here, Vali. He growled. A slight aura of power began to surge around Issei, enough so that the pebbles and small rocks began to shake at his feet. The Silverette could feel the power despite their distance and felt a sinister grin split across his face. Still holding a grudge. Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I, too, have been dying for a rematch as well. Issei's eyes flashed green momentarily. There will not be another. The last time was mere luck, Haidu. That sword will not touch me this time. Is that so? How about we test that theory? Issei growled, taking a step forward. Grip. Before he could get any further, Issei shot around to see Kusha had moved to his side. The look in her eyes slowly quelled the rage burning in the boy's gut. He shut his eyes, taking several calming breaths as he did so. Her again. Are you afraid to fight me by yourself, Haidu? Vali taunted. This is the dragon that beat you, Vali. I'm disappointed. One of the unfamiliar faces spoke up. He was dressed in a school uniform with Chinese armor over top of that. In his hand, there was a spear. It looked dangerous, but Issei felt no type of presence from it. Careful, Cow, Vali might take it to heart this time. Another said. The voice belonged to, what Issei believed, was a wall of a man. He stood at 2 meters and, despite the similar uniform to the, now named, Cow and Greek-inspired armor, was packed with rippling muscle. Vali wasn't amused and was more annoyed by their interruption. I don't need this constant pestering from you heroes. I still believe I could have handled this myself. How about you dance with me, if you're so confident, little dragon? Scylla spoke up, stepping in front of Issei. For Zeus to have sent such an underwhelming welcome party, I feel insulted. The large man chided. What? The large man turned towards the final member. A short boy with gray hair and purple eyes. You think they can beat us? Gods or no gods, they're still weak. Shut it. I'm not arrogant, I am confident. Enough, you two. Cow ordered. Heracles, you would do well to remember why we are here. Leonardo, do the thing. Flash. The group tensed as the boy's eyes glowed a bright hue of purple for a split second. It was also in that moment that the air shifted but, overall, nothing seemed to change. The only foreboding danger was the dead silence that followed as both sides stared one another down. Has anything actually occurred? Scylla questioned. I don't know, but I'd rather not run the risk. Artemis and Medusa readied their bows, and Apollo had formed 2 magic circles in the palms of his hand. The magic circle also formed underneath Kusha, and her hand started to glow. The other 4 also moved forward to stand by Vali. Issei recognized Biku standing next to the silverette. He was the one who had saved the coward at the meeting. However, there was still something tugging at the back of his mind. Something didn't feel right. And not in the dangerous type of off, but something else. Something related to the five up in the stands. Actually, it seemed it was all throughout the air. And there was still the question of where Rumbly. The ground began to shake violently and crack as the large tree began to shift back and forth. The roots began to rip themselves from the ground, leaving much of the ground surrounding it to crack and tear. The few leaves that remained on the branches began to fall off and incinerate before they even had the chance to hit the ground. A massive body of scales and spikes slowly started to pull itself from beneath the ground, clawed hands, dragging the beast below further above ground. More and more chunks of ground were thrown into the chasm below as more and more of the beast began to become visible. And it wasn't long before a head, long and serpent-like, made its appearance. It was the equivalent to that of a viper. And it looked much less friendly than Medusa's. Laden. Artemis announced with a growl. The dragon shook the remainder of the debris from himself before turning a blood-red eye towards the group. At the sight of the twin gods, he smiled a toothy smile. Artemis, Apollo, so good to see you again. The dragon hissed. Apollo stepped forward next, aiming his magic circles at the beast. The feeling is not mutual. You should have stayed dead. Is that so? But it was no choice of mine. I was actually enjoying death. It was similar to that of a long slumber, and you too should know of how much I desire sleep. Laden replied with a smirk. Then we shall be happy to return you to the afterlife. Medusa spoke up next. Laden closed his eyes and shook his head. Unfortunately, I cannot allow that, for I have been revived for a greater calling. So you're just going to work with the Cows Brigade. Like that? Issei blurted out. The insomniac dragon turned its attention to the security. He stared at the boy for a period of a time, even squinting his eyes to get a closer look. Drake, is that you? Laden, it has been a time and a half. So it is. Hahaha, I see that you have become less of yourself. Do not test the dragon of domination, Laden. Remember, the last time it was I that got you stuck as a guard dog for a plant. Laden didn't lose his grin, albeit it looked far more sinister with that kind of face, as he lowered his head to come face to face with Issei. That may be so, but times have changed, haven't they? As he said that, he seemed to look through Issei. It was as if he was staring into his soul. As I thought. And this child that I feel your soul bonded to? He then focused on Issei. I can speak for myself. Issei replied. The insomniac dragon was a bit surprised by the bite in his town. He actually didn't seem all too scared of him. So it would seem. Tell me, child, how do you think you'll fare against a being such as I? I'll bury you the same as those who tried to revive you. There was a brief moment of pause before. Wahahahaha. Laden bursted out into laughter. His howls shook the very colosseum they stood in, the ground rumbling due to the pounding of his claws rising and falling. I like this one, truly. He reminds me much of you when you were younger, Drake. Issei's glare didn't waver, even as the dragon came down from his boisterous explosion. When he noticed the lack of doubt on the brunette's face, he actually felt even more impressed. Whether it was by the boy's sheer courage or by his ignorant stupidity. Either way, he was very much interested. You believe you can accomplish such a thing? Issei's fist tightened. As long as lives are in danger, you bet your scaly ass. Laden rose his head and, what could be considered, a brow. There was another brief pause, everyone waiting with bated breath. Then, a grin formed on the dragon's face once more. I like you, Issei. Please, tell me, what is your last name? I must know, to engrave it within my memory. Haidu. And I'll make sure you never forget it. Ascalon. Pierce. In the blink of an eye, just as he had done with Volley, he summoned the famed dragon slayer and struck it through the dragon before him. It was a clean stab through the beast and was sure to have had some effect against him, no matter how powerful he was. Issei was sure that as long as he got the first hit, the fight would be in their favor. There was no telling how strong any of them truly were, but if he could get an advantage on one of them, then maybe they would fare better. Crack. The group's eyes widened. What? Issei shot up to see where his sword had dug in. Cracks had formed around it. There was no blood or flesh. Not even any real resistance like scales usually possessed. So. Shatter. Laden broke apart. The group's eyes widened further as small particles of what they thought to be the evil dragon fluttered around them. They then realized the problem and their eyes shot to the stands where the five figures still stood. Volley had a large grin on his face. What did you do? Issei said slowly. He fell for it, Volley, Kekiki. Volley's grin widened, borderline uncharacteristically. Of course he did, he's such a disgrace. Volley sounded unlike himself, but, even still, his words were taking a toll on Issei. The brunette was clenching his teeth tight, grinding them as his blood began to boil. You bastards. Ho ho. Did I strike a nerve? Vali continued to taunt, I've only spoken the truth. You're still the weakest Sairaorg in existence. You've stayed alive so far on luck and by those around you. But you take it all away and what are you left with? Nothing. Shut up. Issei. Apollo tried to call out. You were a scared little boy the day you came out of your mom's womb. Shut up. Master, please. Medusa tried next. You were a scared little boy the moment you were killed by a weakling fallen. Shut up. This I'd like to see. Scylla cackled. And you'll still be a scared little boy when I finally take your life. I said shut up. Issei, don't. Artemis tried to reason. Hahaha, face it, Issei. You'll never be enough. You're just not enough. Issei. Gusha's voice broke through. But it didn't stop what had already been set in motion. Snap. Boost 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 boost. I'll fucking kill you. Doon. A surge of demonic and dragonic power exploded from Issei. A bow of green energy formed in his armored hand and an arrow of pure red energy notched itself. The remaining surge funneled at the tip of the arrow, swirling in a visual of destructive beauty. Piercing arrow. Whip. The sheer force behind the released attack began to rip through the Colosseum grounds. Everything within its path was eviscerated even as the arrow arched upwards towards where the five stood. None of them moved, and Vali still had that sickening grin on his face. Bael. Shatter. The arrow struck but, just as Layden, the five shattered like glass. Along with it, the Colosseum walls began to shake. Pieces began to crumble and fall as if the attack had caused a domino effect. The fissure also began to expand, and the many skeletons fell into it, piece by piece. Issei could care less as his blood was still boiling. He had never been as angry as he has today. Even at the cries of those around him, he couldn't stop himself from trying to kill his fated rival a second time. Was this what it meant to be under the curse of the heavenly dragons? To feel such a rage that he didn't hesitate to destroy his opponent. Even now, Issei held no regrets for his actions. In fact, he only felt more enraged that it was simply an illusion and not the real thing. Visions of red and black flashed across his mind, and he couldn't help the mixture of emotions beginning to swell inside him. His anger began to collide with the pain resurfacing in his chest. The realization that the enemy was long gone before they had even arrived. He was tricked again and had failed again due to his lack of ability. Unable to finish the job despite all the training he went through. All the help he received. All the resources. Only for it to be for nothing. Damn it. Hit. Damn it. Hit. Damn it. Hit. Issei looked down at his fist. He was on his knees, staring at the blood that trickled from his knuckles. Even as the cracks reached him and Scylla pulled him away, he didn't react. He only stared into the nothingness. The group gathered in the magic circle Apollo created. Issei was wrapped by Achilles, but hadn't taken in any of the information surrounding him. All he could tell was that he was angry, sad, and ashamed. But, at this point, he couldn't tell why he felt any of those emotions, nor who he felt any of those emotions towards. All he could see now was that the enemy was gone, they had failed, and the Chaos Brigade had come a step closer to their goal. Issei needed to grow stronger. Issei punched the magically enhanced punching bag. Hard. Then he did it again. And again. And again. He didn't stop, even when his breathing became ragged. He didn't stop, even when his arms burned. He didn't stop, even when his body begged him to. He didn't want to stop. Stopping was similar to quitting. He couldn't quit. He wouldn't quit. Not when he had to get stronger faster. Not when he had to stop Vali and whatever he was planning. Not when he had to protect his friends. His family. The door to the training room opened and Sairaorg stepped in. He said nothing, watching as his pawn continued to lay into the punching bag. The heir moved over and behind it, holding the bag as any trainer would. It was unnecessary, but he didn't do it to help stabilize the bag, but to talk to the boy. I received the report of the mission. Issei didn't respond. He only punched. Zeus also called me personally to thank you for what you did. There was the tiniest hesitation between strikes. Heir also sent her thanks, and Artemis wishes for you to call her soon. I didn't do anything. I fucked up. I fucked up bad. There was nothing you could do. They were already gone and left that illusion to cover their escape. The king explained. I could have been faster. Issei argued. You had no idea where they were. Sairaorg said back. Not even Artemis had known. That was a forest not even she could navigate flawlessly. But I could have done something. Layden had already been revived, Issei. Zeus told me of your orders to retreat. It was yours and Artemis's decision to still attempt to confront them, but I shall say it was a poor decision to make. Innocent people could die. So could you. Sairaorg replied. Issei froze and without the continuation of motion, his arms finally dropped. Issei, I understand your desire to protect people, but you can't do that when you continuously put yourself in life-threatening situations. The last time you faced Vali, he underestimated you and you were surrounded by allies. This time, you did not know who would be with him, and he is not the type to make the same mistake twice. And that is not even mentioning the fact an evil dragon, beings with the power to rival the Dragon Kings, had been revived to its full power. You would have died pointlessly if that hadn't left before you arrived. Gods or no gods. Artemis and Apollo would not have been able to protect you in Kusha and fight. Issei didn't reply, Sairaorg having stepped from behind the bag and into his face. And I also heard of your outburst. Had you stayed there, had Scylla, Apollo, Artemis, Medusa, and Kusha not stayed to eventually pull you out, you would have died from the Colosseum burying you. But I'm not done. Issei clamped his mouth shut. This obsession with Vali is blinding you, Issei. Not only to your own health but to the safety of your allies. And, frankly, that is far more worrying than you running into battle. Issei's eyes widened. Do you see what I mean now? It is not just you, Issei. There are others around you, others who want to help you. Kusha, myself, Ladora, all of us here. We want to help but we can't if you continue down this path of blindly chasing Vali. Fuck me. Issei muttered as the weight of his idiocy started to settle in. I'm sure Kusha would be happy too. Ani. What? You said it, not me. The heir shrugged and then he regained his serious look. Issei, you are becoming stronger. With this strength you will attract many different types of people from all walks of life. Some will only want to fight you, to hurt you or the ones closest to you, anything to say they have defeated or cripples you. Issei's fist tightened and the mere thoughts made a pit form in his gut. However, there will also be people who want to follow you, believe in you, and fight with you to the very end. There is no doubt in my mind about that. Both of those sides will one day come to a head and, when it does, the outcome will be based on what you do. Me? Sairaorg nodded. Depending on what you decide could result in all of you coming out alive and well, or… He trailed off, but the answer was clear. Issei looked down at his hands. Damn it. It is lucky that you have recognized your mistake now. The next time, you may not be so lucky to have gods and powerful mythical creatures to bail you out. The dragon slowly curled his fingers into a fist and took a deep breath. Does it ever get easier, Aniki? Leading, I mean. It does but only if you work hard. A good leader will gather a team who trusts in you, the same way you trust in them. You create a bond where you will do everything for them, and they will do everything for you. They will follow you through fire and brimstone, and that is something irreplaceable. And just like that, the heavy air became much lighter. Issei understood better of his mistakes, and he knew of the bar set before him that he had to surpass. They should have retreated the moment Layden had been revived, but he just wanted to fight Vali. Even go as far as to kill him. Was this what Drake had spoken of when he told him of his rivalry with Albion? If it was, Issei was not going to be a puppet with strings. Not to say Drake was forcing him on purpose, but centuries built on fighting one another, it probably was second nature to him. Well, not anymore. He just hoped Kusha wasn't super mad at him. Thanks Aniki. And I'm sorry, too. Issei finally said. I haven't been the best. Even after all this time, I'm still screwing up again and again. I'm sorry. It's not me who you should be apologizing to. Sairaorg answered. No one is perfect, Issei. When I traded for you, I did so knowing of the difficulties that would come with it. I knew Rias meant a lot to you and, once I learned of the baggage behind how you were reincarnated, I knew things would not be easy. However, I'm not going to abandon you simply because of this. I know you mean well in all that you do, and I know you want to be better, not just for Kusha but for yourself. So long as I see you continuing to fight and to better yourself, you can keep being a screw-up for all I care. Hey. That was a gut punch. I jest. He chuckled. But slowly the smile faded and he looked towards the door. You know, you are not the only one who has been beating themselves up since your return, either. Kusha has jumped into training harder, the same as you. She's picked up several more books and has begun trying and testing newer spells, whilst trying to improve her own. She's even made a request back to Olympus to continue what Apollo had been trying to teach her. It's quite amazing when you see it, but I'm also concerned that she's been throwing herself into this despair that she can't seem to help you. Even after both of you had that heart-to-heart. Sairaorg paused, watching as Issei took in the information. I see. Yes, and seeing you kill yourself simply to protect her, you know it hurts her. So she has been training harder, pushing herself more, if it means you don't work yourself to death. And if she gets hurt, or even killed, well, she's mentally prepared herself for it. She can't do that. Why haven't you stopped her? Sairaorg shrugged. Because I understand where you are both coming from. Issei paused. Issei, I wasn't always the heir to my clan. I had it stripped from me when I was young, simply because I did not inherit the power of destruction you've seen Rias use. My father and my own clan, they shunned me and my mother because they didn't believe I was strong. So I became strong. Strong enough to regain my title. Strong enough to protect her. Strong enough that my own father won't raise a hand to me or my mother ever again. Ani. The heir ran a hand through his hair. It's nothing. The point I'm trying to make is that I know of the sacrifices you're making. The ones you've already made. I understand the desire to want to torture your body if it means being able to protect the ones you love. I, too, have nearly killed myself several times if it meant no one harming my family. I see this in both you and Kusha and know that if one of you doesn't stop, neither will the other. But I can't stop. Issei struggled to speak. I couldn't bear the thought of Kusha getting hurt. But I cannot stop training, not when there are people who will try to fight me, hurt her, or worse. He croaked. Kusha thinks the same. It is why she continues to do the same. Possibly even more so now because of you. What? Issei, Kusha was a fighter before you came. She fought like the rest of us, sweated like us, bled like us, and grew stronger. Just like us. Hell, there were times I'm sure she loved the fight more than me. You cannot stop her from doing what she has loved doing far before even I thought to invite her to my peerage. I see. Sairaorg turned and motioned Issei to follow him. They left the training room and started moving down the halls, the occasional maid bowing as they passed before continuing on with whatever chore they were initially doing. I am happy for you, Issei. Both of you. I had my thoughts when you first met and, with each time I saw you two together, I knew it was only a matter of time. You love each other and it is shown in everything you do. Even now, without even being face to face, you two still prove that you love one another to ends far beyond any love I could show either of you. I don't swing that way. Issei remarked. The older devil chuckled. Yes, I should hope not. Last thing I need is Kusha killing me for stealing what's hers. But I digress, you two have both been working hard since your return from Olympus to the point you two haven't even seen each other in days, Issei. It hasn't been that long. He looked over at Issei. It has been almost a week. You have either trained with Ladora, Liban, or Coriana. That doesn't seem a tad suspicious. The brunette didn't make eye contact. Well, I mean. Kusha is not that much better. The king sighed. She hides in her room, reading those books, and also seems to actively avoid any training room if she knows you're in it. Now this caught the dragon by surprise, and he couldn't help the jab of pain that his girlfriend had been actively avoiding him. Oh. Do not take it as you doing something wrong. In fact, I'd say it is more out of fear than anything else. Issei knitted his brows. Fear. She's scared of me? Sairaorg shook his head. No, not at all. She's more scared of what could happen to you if you continue believing you have to fight by yourself. Or that you have to protect her, even if it kills you. She thinks that you believe she isn't strong enough, and due to the fact in the past several battles you two have been in, Kakabiel, Vali, and the illusion in the Colosseum, that she has not participated in, has started to believe the thought herself. What? Issei shouted, blushing as a few servants looked towards the commotion. That's not true at all, Aniki. She is one of the strongest people I've met. It's because of her that I got to where I am now. She doesn't believe that. And until she believes it, she won't stop. Just like you. But you can't stop her either. Issei slumped. The Bael placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a comforting smile. He didn't smile back, but he appreciated the gesture nonetheless. Would you care for a little advice? The boy nodded. Try to fall in love with her fighting. Kusha has never been one to back down from a fight, especially involving her family. You mean a lot to her and seeing you kill yourself hurts her. She knows she can't stop you, but that doesn't mean she can't help you, so that you really don't get yourself killed. I'd say if you do the same, it will go a long way for her. But you have to talk to her, allow you two to voice your concerns, and listen to one another. Every relationship requires communication or it is doomed to fail. Right. Thanks Aniki. My pleasure. And I do hope to one day see a little one running around soon. Ani. Zoxoxoxox when he found her, he couldn't help the way his heart fluttered. She was sweaty, she was tired, and she was covered in marks, but she was beautiful nonetheless. He could see the results of her failed spells and the frustration on her face. Yet she tried again and again and again. No matter how many times she failed, she continued. It was breathtaking. As he stepped into the room, she turned to him, releasing the spell she had been working on. He moved towards her, feeling a warmth enclosed on him as he grew closer. He could even see a smile pull at the corner of her lips. Kusha, Issei. They both began to blurt out their apologies at the same time. Kusha giggled. Please, let me go first. She said. Issei, I know I haven't been the greatest girlfriend or senior devil to you. I have had you fighting all of these battles by yourself, and all I've ever done is watch. Watch you risk your body and your life while I stand back. I left you suffering for so long, and should have been better not just towards all of the fighting, but towards you yourself as well. Your feelings, your doubts, your troubles, all of it. I couldn't even pull you away when the Colosseum had started to collapse. I haven't been as good as I could have been, as I should have been, and for that I am so sorry. Issei's shoulders relaxed and a half smile pulled at his lips. He reached over and gently wrapped his hand around the back of her neck before bringing his face close to hers. They touched foreheads and he slowly shook his head side to side. She sounded so panicked as she admitted each and everything. She felt like she hadn't done enough, just as Sairaorg had said. And none of her problems were directed at him, but herself. Was she truly worried about those things? I need to apologize more than you. He finally said. First and foremost, you have been the best thing to happen to me, never think less than that. Second, I'm sorry too. Sorry that I have always felt the need to fight for you and not with you. It was poor of me to believe it's my job to protect you. I'm a guy so I can be an idiot at times. You are a devil and have been one way longer than myself. I felt I had to do all the fighting because I wanted to protect you. I never wanted to intervene so I never questioned if you were or weren't fighting. And, for a moment, I truly wanted nothing more than keeping you as far from fighting as possible. But that sounded no better than locking you in a cage and throwing away the key. I am Sairaorg's queen and a devil by birth. Kusha commented before jokingly continuing. Fighting is what we know. I understand that and will try my hardest to come to accept that. I won't stop you from doing what you love just because I worry of what might happen. Like you said, you're a devil and Iniki's queen. Fighting is all we know. It was actually Iniki's suggestion that I try and fall in love with your fighting. I already love your kindness, your sincerity, and your perseverance. Might as well love the part that kicks all kinds of ass. Kusha giggled as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Our king, actually giving sound dating advice. That doesn't require punching or apples. I never thought I'd see the day. Issei shrugged. I've got no complaints if it means we become closer. Does that mean you'll only have eyes for me? She teased, batting her eyelashes. Without question. He replied, without a hint of hesitation. Kusha couldn't help but giggle. He was cute when he was serious. Wasn't it your dream to have a harem? To be the harem king? He told you that, huh? Issei asked with an embarrassed chuckle. It was a dream. Hell, it still kinda is, but if you were to tell me that you wanted me for yourself, I wouldn't argue. But why? It was a genuine question. If there was one thing Sairaorg had told her, it was how passionately Issei had told him of his desire for a harem. Issei shrugged. Like I said, it was a dream, but you are my reality. You and Iniki have pulled me from some very dark places. Even now, just being with you, it brightens my day. Makes the world not seem so big and the weight not feel so heavy. If you have a problem with other women pining for me, as if they would, I would never want to hurt you in any way, and I'll shut them down immediately. Kusha looked at him, studying him for just a moment. That was pretty mature of you, Ice. Heh, I'm kinda trying to turn a new leaf. I'm tired of running head first without a plan. His arms tightened around her waist and he pulled her closer. After all, I've got much more to lose now. Is that so? Kusha began, her own arms tightening around his neck. Was this revelation before or after you destroyed the Colosseum with that impressive arrow? It was a lapse of judgment. Issei replied with a heavy blush. She hummed with a playful smirk. Then she gave him a quick peck on the lips. Long enough for him to taste but not long enough to enjoy. Why, you're pretty aggressive today. He stuttered out. Best to stake my claim now before the others. Others? You can't be harem king without a harem, right? But I thought. It was only a question. She unwrapped one of her arms and placed her hand over his heart. Issei, we are devils. Strength and power attract many different types of people. Not only that, you're a dragon, and that is its own level of power that attracts many more types of people. When I knew I loved you, I knew that I wouldn't be the only one. I have already come to accept that I can't handle you on my own. Then the smirk returned. You're already quite vigorous and we have yet to lay together. It took a moment for him to understand what she meant. But once he did. EHHHH. Her lips stretched into a grin, a few teeth showing. Don't tell me you haven't thought of us together, Issei. She drew circles in his chest with a lone finger. B but. I. She gave him another peck, same as the first before pulling away. Because I have and, well, my heart isn't ready right now, I do look forward to the day. His brain short-circuited not too long after. It took moments to reboot, moments Kusha was very patient to wait, grin still on display. Who are you and what have you done with my girlfriend? She laughed, though that smile never left her face. He could feel his entire face heating up. He knew his girlfriend was cute, but this was downright sexy. Sairaorg spoke to you. I had also been talked to. She continued to draw circles. By who? He wanted to thank whoever it was and wish them the best in life. This was definitely the turn he needed after his time in Olympus. That would be, Master. A pair of hands wrapped under his arms, placing themselves on his chest as two soft mounds pressed into his back. He tried to look over his shoulder, but the familiar feeling of slithering and forked tongues across his neck gave him all the answer he needed. Medusa. Yes, master. That's right. The legendary Gorgon had returned home with them. She had still desired to be his familiar after everything. And he had been neglecting her just as he had avoided Kusha. A pit opened in his gut as he realized just how much of an ass he had been. He was a terrible boyfriend and master. Squish. Kusha had moved closer, pressing her own generous bust into his chest. Mister. No more feeling sorry about yourself. I told you before, you're not in this alone. That's right, master. Medusa continued, her hands running up and down his chest and stomach sensually. You're the best we could ask for. And I know you'll only get better. Her snakes also seemed to agree as they licked at his neck, tickling him. He couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha, okay, I get it. He slowly came down from his fit of laughter, and, when he did, he gave both of them a comforting smile. Thank you, both of you. I really needed it. It is not an issue. However, next time, I may not be so gentle. Medusa teased with a smirk. A bead of sweat slipped down Issei's brow. Please don't. Maybe a sharp blow will be what I need. What shall we do now? Kusha asked, grabbing hold of his hand as she did. He scratched a lone finger against his cheek. Actually, and please don't hate me, but a few of the guys are taking a training retreat. And we leave tonight. What? Surprise. That's it guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.